The dawn was approaching, which meant that they didn't have a lot of time left. Sunny and Elyas had to leave the cursed island of the Red Colosseum before the night ended, and the crowds of war god worshippers arrived to spectate the sacrificial slaughter on the blood-soaked arena. Once they were elsewhere, pursuing them would become much harder, not only because the ancient magic of the demon of desire would remain far behind them, but also because the warmongers would have to split their forces to search all the neighboring isles. The further the two of them escaped, the wider net their pursuers would have to throw. By then, the zealots would have to deal with the crushing as well. Sunny wasn't familiar with the western reaches of the Chained Isles, which belonged to the followers of war since he had never traveled in this direction before. They could try to escape northeast, toward the Hollow Mountains and the Night Temple. But that region was unfamiliar to him as well. Directly to the east, a long distance away, lay the Ivory City where Elyas hailed from and the Prison of Hope. However, the eastern direction would be where the pursuers were most likely to concentrate their search, since running toward the domain of their enemies, the Sun God's people, would have been the safest choice. After hesitating for a few seconds, Sunny pulled the young awakened toward the southern edge of the Red Island. If they journey southeast, they would eventually reach the ruined fortress. Well, it might not have been ruined yet, where he had once welcomed Effie and Kai. There, the influence of the war faction was bound to be severely diminished. More importantly, that was the boundary to the part of Hope's shattered kingdom that Sunny knew and had explored before. Before the start of the nightmare, he and the other members of the cohort had agreed to travel to the Iron Hand Island should they be separated. Sunny would be able to easily find his way there from the southern Great Chain that anchored the isles to the mainland beneath. Hidden in the darkness, Sunny and Elyas ran across the meadow aiming to reach the edge of the island and one of the heavenly chains that rattled below from time to time, disturbed by the turbulent winds of the border between the two skies. Sunny urged himself onward. Once they were over the edge, Sunny could summon the heavenly burden and the dark wing to carry them to the chain, or even hide them in the darkness of the sky below for a while. Their salvation was so close. It was already just a few meters away. But then his heart suddenly grew cold. Sunny breathed a quiet denial. In the end, it wasn't close enough. Just as they reached the edge, a quiet sigh resounded from the darkness, and suddenly, Sunny was laying on the ground, his vision blurred and his whole body numb. There was no oxygen in his lungs, and no matter how hard he tried to inhale, it was of no use. His chest seemed to be on fire. A few seconds of agony later, the shock of the terrifying impact that had cracked the breastplate of the undying chain and sent him flying to the ground began to fade, and Sunny was able to finally draw in a hoarse, desperate breath. Sunny cursed hoarsely. He moved his arm, reaching for the hilt of the red priest's cleaver that lay near, buried in the soft grass. However, before his fingers closed around it, a delicate foot stepped on his wrist, and suddenly it was as though the weight of a whole world descended upon him. Sunny groaned, then gritted his teeth and looked up at the harrowing creature that had attacked them from beyond the edge of the island. It was a graceful, breathtaking beauty wearing a simple red tunic, her face tender and solemn, her dazzling eyes shining like two silver stars. Solvin looked down at him and smiled with sadness.
Afraid that this is as far as you go. Ah, we meet again, child of shadows.
Sunny stared at the beautiful saint with grim resentment burning in his black, tenebrous eyes. He remained motionless, knowing that his worst fear had just come true. The transcendent immortal herself had arrived to hunt them down. He thought feverishly, trying to come up with some way to escape the priestess of war. Soul Serpent and Saint were still hiding in his shadow, so he could command them to attack. But what could an awakened and an ascended demon do against a transcendent? An undying one that was chosen by the gods and had lived for at least 1,000 years, no less. No, sending them to fight that horror would be just sending them to their deaths. In all of his travels, Sunny had never met a creature more frightening than Solvin. Of that, he was sure. Even the corrupted leviathans of the Dark Sea had not instilled such caution in him. Maybe only the harrowing rot in the Ebony Tower had, but he hesitated to call it a living being. Then, what? What he was supposed to do?
Damn you, fate. You never let go of your prey, do you?
Sonny gritted his teeth, then growled, and tried to strike at Solving with the cruel sight. However, the beautiful woman simply swatted it away, breaking his fingers and sending the somber blade flying over the edge of the island. She shook her head.
No, it's not like that, little demon. You deserve a better end.
Then Sonny felt himself being lifted into the air and then thrown to his knees. A moment later, a stifled scream announced that Elyas too had not escaped the immortal transcendent. His gaunt figure fell near him, a pained grimace contorting the young man's young face. Soon, the unassailable power that pressed Sonny into the ground disappeared, and he was able to breathe again. Looking up, he saw Solving standing in front of them, his silken skin caressed by the gentle starlight. She looked at them with an inexplicable expression, her long chestnut hair dancing softly in the wind.
There has to be something I can do, think.
The transcendent priestess smiled, the world itself growing brighter from her mesmerizing smile.
Trials of life are over. I congratulate you, champions. Although some of your foes were vanquished under the cover of darkness instead of in the bright light of day under the gaze of the gods, you have defeated them nevertheless. You have even slain one of blessed. Thank you. Thank you for giving that which I was unable to. You have my gratitude, both of you.
Sonny stared at the beautiful saint, frozen in place. Despite all the hatred he harbored against the monstrous priestess, despite how much he wanted to pay her back 100-fold for all the suffering she had caused him, he couldn't help but forget his anger and be enchanted by her beauty. Solving was just too splendid, too lovely. Her eyes were too lustrous, her smile too charming, her soft lips too alluring. This woman was created to be worshipped. For men to wage wars in hope of earning the right to stand by her side.
Snap out of it, idiot. Have you not seen beautiful things before? Beautiful things are always the deadliest.
Sonny bit his lip, allowing his sharp fangs to pierce it. Pain sobered him up somewhat. Beside him, Elyas was staring at Solving with grim eyes. Strangely, the young man did not seem to be affected by her transcendent beauty at all. It was understandable. After all, his whole family had been slaughtered by the followers and on the orders of the dazzling priestess. Meanwhile, something appeared in Solving's hands. It was a small object that made Sonny's eyes narrow suddenly, and his breathing become quicker. The saint sighed and stretched her hand forward, a simple knife carved out of a single piece of wood laying on her open palm.
Of life are over, and so I offer you this gift and the right to fight for your freedom, to struggle for your life, as life is an eternal struggle. Will you accept, champions? Will you take this wooden blade and wield it? It is all I can give you.
Sonny's heart skipped a beat. Sonny breathed a quiet curse. The fairy tale about a wooden sword Elyas had once shared with him had actually inexplicably turned out to be true. And more than that, Sonny recognized the sword instantly. He had already held that wooden knife once, a long time ago, far, far in the future. This was the knife he had killed Solving with. Sonny just realized he is holding the very blade that will one day kill Solving, and someone you know would lose their mind over that twist. Share this episode with them now, and let us return to the story. Sonny stared at the wooden knife, suffocating pain still radiating from the spot where Solving had hit him. The transcendent was so fast that he had not even seen or sensed her strike. Not that it mattered anymore. As he studied the familiar blade, different pieces of knowledge suddenly clicked together, revealing a chilling truth. Stunned by the grim revelation, Sonny shuddered. Sonny realized the truth. Finally, the purpose of the Red Colosseum made sense to him. The cruelty of the trials. Perverse faith of the zealous warriors, their worship of struggle, battle, and death. The tale of a wooden blade that granted the champion a chance to win their freedom. When he looked back, it all seemed so obvious. The strange cult of war that had blossomed on the ruins of the Kingdom of Hope was built around the tenet of glory. Glory was both the highest virtue and the highest of honors, and it could only be won by prevailing against overwhelming odds through mortal struggle, which was the essence of life. And war, as far as these zealots were concerned. So, they enslaved a horde of abominations and threw themselves against it, fighting to the death against their slaves in the arena. With each battle, the weak were slaughtered, and the strong got to live and fight against more powerful enemies the next day, all under the beaming gazes of the jubilant crowd. Those who died perished in the pursuit of glory, and those who lived came closer and closer to earning it. That was the sacrificial ritual the followers of war performed every decade or so, spilling blood in the name of their glorious dream. However, there was one problem with this demented arrangement, a glaring flaw that made the trials of the Red Colosseum seem futile, hollow, and senseless. What was the end of all this? Was everyone participating in the battle destined to die? Would there be no victor? What happened to the person or creature left standing at the very end, devoid of enemies to struggle against? Where was their glory? Now, looking at the wooden knife that contained Solvin's death, freely offered to them by the immortal Transcendent herself, Sunny finally understood everything. That last champion would indeed be gifted a wooden blade and a chance to fight for their freedom, just like Elyas had learned from the fairy tales in the Ivory City. They just had to overcome one last enemy. To fight against Solvin herself, this whole feverish hell, the Red Colosseum, the blood-soaked arena, the cult of murderous glory she had built, existed for one single purpose: to find, or rather create, a warrior capable of killing their saint. Eternal Solving, undefeated Solving, wanted to die. The madness of this nightmare was born out of the 1,000 years of immortality the beautiful priestess had endured, out of the desire to be free of her eternal duty as Hope's warden. However, Solving didn't just want to die. She wanted to die a glorious death, one worthy of a true servant of war. Or rather, she simply could not allow herself to give up. Giving up without struggle was a sin against her faith, her God, and her conviction. So the beautiful Transcendent could only allow herself to die if she was defeated. That was her goal. Finding someone valiant enough to kill her was Solving's most ardent hope, her deepest desire. Feeling a hint of vague suspicion, Sunny frowned. He was certain that he was right, that his reasoning and insight were correct. But at the same time, there was still something out of place. Something still didn't make sense. He just couldn't say what, and there was no time to think. Solving was still offering them the wooden knife and a chance to save their lives. All they had to do was to take it and win, but he wasn't fooled. Her offer might have seemed like a gift, but it was just a death sentence. Sure, the knife contained a death, Solving's death, and would be able to slay her with one strike. At this point, Sunny was certain that there had been 7 knives once, each meant to kill one of the 7 immortals created by the Lord of Light. And this one, the wooden knife, was meant to kill Solving. However, taking it was only going to spell their doom, wooden blade or not. Beautiful priestess was still a Transcendent, a servant of war with 1,000 years of battle experience, an ancient warrior who had fought and triumphed in battles too many to count. And despite her desire to be defeated, she would not throw this fight. Giving in without struggling with all her might was against Solving's conviction. Fighting against her was suicide. By his side, Elyas' pupils widened dangerously. Feeling a small change in his partner's posture, Sunny shifted and glanced at him.
What is this fool trying to do?
The youth gritted his teeth and then slowly rose to his feet. His tattered tunic had long ago lost any remnant of its once pure white color and was now hanging like rags on his gaunt, emaciated body. Despite that, the young awakened looked full of resolve and determination, his eyes glinting with grim purpose. Sunny demanded what he was doing and called him a fool.
What are you doing, Snows, you fool?
Despite the pain in his throat, Sunny growled loudly, trying to warn Elyas of how fatal his actions were. But his call fell on deaf ears. Sunny cursed his inability to speak.
Damn it, why can't I talk?
For the first time since he had entered the nightmare, Sunny felt really desperate to speak. But he couldn't. The demon's body robbed him of the ability to converse with humans in any meaningful way. Panicking, he made a motion to stand up, hoping to grab the youth before the fool made a lethal mistake. But the pressure Solving had exerted on him was back, paralyzing the body of the 4-armed shadow creature. He groaned, suddenly unable to move, and struggled to even keep his head up. Elyas hesitated for a moment, and then looked at Sunny with a sad smile.
It's all right, demon. Thank you. Thank you for getting us this far. But now it is my turn. This is our chance. This is what we've been fighting for all this time, is it not? The tales my mother told me were all true. I'll free us both. You'll see, the Lord of Light will guide my hand.
With that, he reached out and took the wooden knife from Solvin's hand, his fingers wrapping tightly around its hilt. The priestess smiled radiantly and took a step back. His beautiful eyes shone with joy, and his voice resounded in the darkness of the dying night, full of longing and hope. Solvin urged the boy to be brave as the gods watched.
Be brave, boy, the gods are watching.
Sunny struggled desperately against the crushing force that pressed him into the ground, but it was of no use. A stifled roar escaped from his mouth. A few steps away, Elyas straightened, calmly looked the transcendent beauty in the eyes, and then assumed a battle stance. He knew what he was doing after all. The youth was as talented of a fighter as Sunny had been at his age, or maybe even better. 2 months of constant battles in the arena gave him plenty of experience, more than most would have acquired in a lifetime, and certainly no less than what Sunny had on the Forgotten Shore. Sunny protested that it was not enough. But what if? What if Elyas really had a chance? Sunny had achieved many impossible things himself as well, and seen others do the same. Even in the direst of situations, there was always hope. That was a lesson he had learned against all odds in the hell of the Forgotten Shore, and later in the stone mausoleum of the Night Temple. Without wasting any time on doubt and hesitation, Elyas sent his soul essence flowing in a raging flood and shot forward. Moving with grace and speed that few awakened could ever hope to achieve, his hand flew through the air, swift enough to appear as an almost imperceptible blur. The strike was swift and cunning. However, it was just a feint. His true intention was to attack from below, and it was hidden almost perfectly. There was no sign of the fact that the young man was preparing to change the direction of the blow. He had learned well from watching Sunny fight. But if Sunny could see it, then so could Solving. His eyes narrowed. A split second before the wooden knife reached the Transcendent's flesh, Elyas suddenly stumbled, then slowed down. Taking a few unsteady steps forward, he swayed and suddenly toppled to the ground. A thin red line appeared across his chest and then burst open in a flood of blood. Above him, Solving sighed with sorrow and lowered her hand, a single drop of crimson falling from her delicate fingers. Her lips trembled, and then a barely audible whisper reached Sunny's ears. Solving whispered that it was not today. He didn't hear it, though. Frozen, Sunny stared at Elyas, who lay motionlessly on the ground, the grass soaking in his blood. The young man's unmoving face was turned to him, his light blue eyes still open. However, those eyes, which had been bright and lively once, were now dull and empty, reflecting the boundless darkness of the night sky. Elyas' face seemed almost peaceful. The youth was finally free. Sunny roared, struggling furiously to stand up, but all he achieved was damaging his mangled body even further. Without paying any attention to that pain, he continued fighting against the invisible chains holding him down, feeling the ground itself shift beneath his knees.
I'll kill her, I'll rip her to shreds.
Solving remained motionless for a while, and then silently bent down to pick up the wooden knife from the youth's bloodless fingers. Coming closer, she stared at Sunny with a dark expression, and then asked,
So what about you? Are you willing to fight me, little demon?
Sunny glared at her, his teeth bared in a hateful grin. He wanted to. Oh, how he wanted to. But he could not. Fighting Solving meant nothing but death. Slowly, he shook his head. The beautiful priestess sighed.
Of course. Why did I expect different from the servant of cowardly shadow?
Her hand suddenly flashed, and terrible pain exploded through Sunny's body. Looking down in a morbid déjà vu, he saw a graceful arm protruding from his chest. The breastplate of the undying chain shattered into pieces. Solving grimaced and pulled his hand out of his broken chest, easily tearing the still-beating heart out in the process. She glanced at it with disappointment, and then sent the body of the four-armed demon tumbling over the edge of the island. The last thing he saw before plummeting into the abyss was her graceful, beautiful figure standing forlornly in the tall grass. Then, Sunny fell into the embrace of darkness. His body flew down, faster and faster, quickly disappearing into the nothingness of the sky below. Soon, it was so far away from the Red Island that even a memory of sunlight couldn't reach that far. His chest was torn open, and his heart was violently ripped from it, leaving behind a harrowing wound. After falling for a while, Sunny sighed. Luckily, this strange body of his had two hearts, and while anyone else would have succumbed to blood loss after having one destroyed, he possessed blood weave, which kept him alive despite receiving such a ghastly wound. It didn't feel too good, though. In fact, the pain was terrible, but it could not compare even a little to the anguish he felt in his soul. Sunny closed his eyes.
I'm sorry, Elyas, I failed, but don't worry, I'll kill her on your behalf one day, kill her again. I'll kill her as many times as it takes to erase the very memory of her from existence. Just you wait.
He gritted his teeth, then summoned the heavenly burden, and then thrust the black needle into his flesh. Dark wing appeared on his shoulders, swiftly turning into a blur. Sunny's fall slowed, then slowed some more and finally turned into flight. He was flying into the darkness, moving further and further away from the Red Colosseum. Far above, the eastern horizon had already turned pale lilac, announcing the arrival of a new day. Eventually, Sunny returned to the altitude where the dark undersides of the floating islands could be seen. He tiredly approached one, sensed something moving in the deep shadows, and glided past without coming too close. The next one didn't seem to harbor any horrors. He flew toward the rough stone surface and sunk his claws and talons into it, clinging to the bottom of the island like a bat. Strangely, Sunny did not need to exert any conscious effort to remain in that position, and simply lay upside down on the cold stones for a while, struggling against exhaustion. He was in much worse shape than it had seemed before. 2 months of ruthless battles in the Red Colosseum had taken a toll on his body, and the terrible wound in his chest was still there, sapping him of strength and vitality. With the help of blood weave, the body of the four-armed demon managed to survive, having one of its 2 hearts violently torn out. But that didn't mean that it was going to fully recover from that vicious injury. With only 1 heart left to pump blood through his veins, Sunny felt lethargic and weak. That weakness would probably never go away, not unless he somehow managed to find or grow a new heart. He was tired to the bone, overwhelmed by pain and numb. Terribly, utterly numb. After the harrowing intensity of the past 2 months and the crushing strain of their disastrous attempt to escape, Sunny finally reached safety and found himself drained of all thoughts and emotions. He couldn't muster enough energy to feel joy or relief, grief or sorrow, even anger or hatred. Tired. He was just too tired. The island under which Sunny hid was separated from the Red Colosseum by 4 or 5 heavenly chains far to the south. He was still deep within the territory of the followers of war, but no one was going to discover him, not unless they had wings, and even then. Finding the child of shadows in the cold embrace of darkness was not going to be easy. However, no one was looking. After all, he was considered to be dead. Sunny looked at the shattered breastplate of the undying chain and then dismissed the damaged armor to give it a chance to repair itself. Then, he summoned the mantle of underworld and gasped when its onyx metal wrapped itself around his mangled chest. The intricate black armor embraced his tortured body, soothing its aches. Sunny doubted that anyone from the real world would be able to spy on him here in the depths of a nightmare. But even if they could, he didn't care anymore. He just wanted to be safe and protected. As soon as the fearsome mantle hid his wounds, Sunny tiredly closed his eyes and plunged into the nothingness of a deep, dreamless sleep. Thirst and pain. That were the first things Sunny felt before slowly remembering who he was, what he was, and where he had found himself. He was in hell. Where else? Sunny realized he had fallen asleep. He opened his eyes and saw the rough surface of the bare stone in front of him. Sunny was still clinging to the underside of the island, his claws buried deep into it and holding him in place like iron pitons. He felt better, somewhat. His body was still a labyrinth of pain, but it was much milder than before. Judging by the state of his wounds, he had slept for many, many days. No wonder he was so thirsty. Sonny shifted slightly and freed one of his 4 hands, then summoned the endless spring and drank a few gulps of water. Then he turned his head and stared into the darkness, indifferent to everything. His body was healing, but his mind was still empty and numb, exhausted of its ability to feel anything. All that remained was cold rationality. But even that part of him was dull and apathetic, devoid of any interest and desire. He just didn't care about anything or anyone right now. The mere thought of caring seemed exhausting. After a while, Sonny sighed. Sonny wondered what he should do. Despite everything that had happened, his immediate goal remained simple and straightforward. He had to traverse the whole Kingdom of Hope and reach the Iron Hand Island to regroup with the cohort, once they were together. If the others were still alive, they would know what to do. Sonny didn't feel particularly motivated to attempt the perilous journey, but he knew that he had to. It was a simple enough objective, at least. In his current state, he felt reluctant to think about anything arduous, obtuse, or complicated. All he had to do was to move southeast for a while and then turn north. Maybe his condition would improve by the time he reached the eastern edges of the Chained Isles. The road, however, was not going to be easy. Sonny was going to have to sneak through the vast territory of the warmongers without being seen, reach the southernmost boundary of the region, and then retrace the path he had taken to welcome Effie and Kai almost all the way back to the sanctuary of Noctis. It was also unclear who ruled the eastern territories in this era, or if they were wild and overrun by nightmare creatures, like they would be in the future. He grimaced, remained motionless for a while, and then summoned the covetous coffer. Catching the frightened box before it plummeted into the sky below, Sonny freed one more hand and took a handful of synth-paste tubes out of the coffer, then dismissed it. Consuming the tasteless sludge to replenish his strength, he summoned the runes and finally took a proper look at them for the first time in months.
Name Sunless, true name Lost from Light, rank Awakened, class Demon, Shadow Cores 37, Shadow Fragments.
His pupils narrowed. Sonny questioned the reading, but there was no mistake. The runes read,
Shadow Fragments 2223 3000.
Sonny stared at the number, then hung his head back and tried to chuckle, producing a disturbing bestial snarl instead. His throat pulsed with sharp pain, but he shrugged it off and bared his teeth in a dark, bitter grin. When entering the nightmare, Sonny had less than 300 fragments collected, which meant that he had accumulated almost 2,000 of them in the Red Colosseum. In fact, in those 2 months, he had probably slaughtered more nightmare creatures and humans than in the previous 2 years, his whole life as a carrier of the spell. Was this the price of glory? Sonny remained motionless for a while, then shifted his gaze, moving it to the very end of the field of shimmering runes. Soon, Nef's description appeared before him. He lingered for a few moments, and then read,
Soul Fragments 2478 4000.
The corner of his mouth twitched.
Of course, she is in a hell of her own, after all.
The gap between them had diminished, but barely. He was still behind, still lacking. But she was alive, at least, and fighting with all her strength to return. If Nef refused to give up, then he would have to persevere too. With a sigh, Sonny turned away and looked back to his runes, finding the list of his memories and echoes. His eyes suddenly gleamed, but then grew dark and slightly despondent. Sonny questioned how it was even possible.
What the hell? How is this even possible?
Among the names of his memories, dozens of new ones shimmered in the darkness. It seemed that the spell continued to reward him even while their connection was obstructed by the sorceries of hope. It sort of made sense. The fact that Sonny had not been able to communicate with the spell did not mean that it had not continued to watch his every step. He was inside one of its nightmares, after all, which created a swarm of questions on its own. Not caring to consider them, Sonny silently counted the new memories. 39. There were 39 of them. And yet, there was not a single echo he had received after slaughtering nearly 1,000 nightmare creatures. Not even a hint of one.
Doesn't make any sense, none at all. What is this, a joke?
It seemed that his luck when it came to memories had been incredible, while his luck when it came to echoes had been beyond terrible. He should have received 4 of 5 at least, but he had not. Sonny stared into the darkness for a while, his expression glum. Then he sighed.
Well, doesn't matter. It's a pity that I did not receive an echo of the Red Priest, though. I would have made him into a shadow, just to get a chance to kill that bastard again.
He studied his new memories, slowly reading their names and descriptions. A few were good and a couple was splendid. The rest, however, were worse than what he already had in his arsenal. Their only use was to feed Saint. This time, however, he did not hurry to give them away as sustenance for the taciturn demon. Instead, Sonny hesitated for a long time and then dismissed the runes. He had other plans for these memories. Each of them possessed a unique weave, one that he would be able to study and experiment with while not fearing to damage or destroy an actually valuable instrument. He would be able to use Weaver's needle now, too, instead of cutting his fingers on the ethereal but perfectly sharp strings. Satisfied with that decision, Sonny finished the last of synth-paste tubes he had taken out of the covetous coffer, indifferently dropped them into the dark abyss of the sky below, and sent one of his shadows to scout out the situation above. The sun was rolling toward the horizon, and the night was swiftly approaching. That meant that he would have to move soon. Over the next few days, Sonny traveled southeast, staying in the darkness of the sky below during the night and finding shelter on the undersides of the floating island during the day. He was still weak because of his injuries and had to make frequent stops to rest and sleep, which slowed him down considerably. In the course of these days, Sonny made several stunning discoveries. The first one was rather pleasant and beneficial to him, as it turned out. There were far fewer nightmare creatures populating the Kingdom of Hope in this era than there were in the future. That included the harrowing abominations that dwelled on the dark side of the islands. Their absence made the task of remaining below the isles far easier for him. Of course, there were still some monstrosities hiding in the darkness, but not nearly enough to make it too hard to avoid them. In retrospect, that made sense. These lands were not completely devastated yet, and there were plenty of humans living on the levitating islands. It was because of them and their efforts that the population of nightmare creatures was so low. It was also the reason why it took Solving and her zealots a full decade or more to gather enough abominations to hold the accursed trials. The second discovery he made was far less fortuitous and also had to do with the human inhabitants of the Kingdom of Hope. He was still in the territory of the worshippers of war, which made it all but impossible to appear on the surface of the islands during the day unnoticed. But the dark side wasn't completely safe either. Not once and not twice. He saw humans traveling either across the heavenly chains or through the sky below. Hidden in the shadows, he observed several flying ships sail through the boundless darkness, some adorned with sails of pristine white, some of vivid red. He even witnessed 2 vessels locked in furious battle, arrows and pieces of burning wood falling into the abyss like rain. In the end, the ship with white sails rammed into the red one, splitting the vessel in half and sending the captain and the crew to their deaths in the sky below. These ships looked simultaneously similar and different to the one the fire keepers had repaired and guided to the Ebony Tower. They were much smaller and slower, and didn't have a magnificent tree growing around their masts. The vessel Sonny had spent several weeks on looked much more ancient in comparison, like the original in front of lesser copies. The third discovery Sonny made was perhaps the most shocking. The crushing did not exist in this era. The islands rose and fell as usual, but no matter how high they climbed, no deadly force assaulted them, threatening to destroy anything too weak or too slow to run away. Many of the nightmare creatures Sonny had studied before hunting them down in the future were somewhat different here from what he knew. He had understood that fact in the arena, and confirmed it while observing the islands through the eyes of his shadows after escaping it. Now, he learned why. The crushing did not yet exist, and for that reason, the nightmare creatures had not gone through thousands of years of adaptation to learn how to survive its burden. Neither their bodies nor their behavior changed to accommodate the deadly force that would terrorize the entire region in the future yet. And that was why he had found them to be both familiar and strange. Armed with that knowledge, Sonny slowly made his way south, leaving the Red Colosseum, and Saint Salvain further and further behind. His wounds slowly healed, and soon he felt that he would not be entirely useless in the fight anymore. That was just in time because his days of peace were about to come to an end. It took Sonny almost 2 weeks to approach the southern boundary of the Chained Isles. The further from the Red Colosseum he went, the less presence the warmongers had there. With Salvain's militant order occupying the western reaches of the Kingdom of Hope and the followers of Sun God in control of its center, engaged in a centuries-old conflict with each other, the South remained desolate and neglected. That made Sonny's life a bit easier, but also caused him to lower his guard a little. He still had to remain vigilant, though, because there were more and more unsightly horrors hiding in the deep shadows of the dark side as he traveled away from human settlements. On one of these days, Sonny found himself clinging to the underside of a small floating island as he waited for the arrival of night. He had already rested and dined on several tubes of synth paste, so for now, there was nothing much for him to do, as had been his habit for the past week or so. He summoned one of the memories from the Colosseum and studied its weave, trying to peer into the secrets of the complicated pattern of ethereal strings. Armed with his innate intuition and the ability to compare different memories to each other, he was making tortuously slow progress in his understanding of sorcery, or at least of this type of it. Weaver's sorcery seemed elegant, strange, and marvelous, but also inhumanly complex and elaborate. Sonny doubted that he would be able to comprehend its foundational principles anytime soon, and even if he did, his human mind was simply unable to encompass the whole of the infinitely convoluted patterns, let alone create one from scratch. Maybe if he had a powerful supercomputer instead of a brain. In any case, he was not going to be creating his own memories just yet, or maybe ever. That didn't mean that he couldn't do anything, though. Sonny might not have had the capacity to create new weaves, but he had already proven his ability to copy those that already existed. He had reproduced the simplest and most common of them, the pattern responsible for storing memories in his soul and then summoning them back through essence. In the dungeon of the Red Colosseum, with enough time and preparation, he would be able to copy other enchantments of the familiar weaves, too. Creating anything meaningful was going to take a while, though. But that was not what Sonny was currently trying to achieve. Instead, he wanted to expand his sorceress repertoire from 1 trick to no less than 2 tricks. He was experimenting with his memories in hopes of learning how to modify and change an existing enchantment. Right now, Sonny was holding a slim dagger in one hand and a small silver bell in the other. The silver bell was the first memory he had ever received, and also the simplest. While the slim dagger was one of the weapons he had won in the arena, its enchantment was rather straightforward. It made the weapon utterly noiseless. It didn't ring when struck against armor or another blade, and didn't even rustle as it entered the enemy's flesh. Sonny had chosen these 2 memories for the experiment because, at the core, their enchantments were very similar. One was that of sound amplification, while the other was that of sound nullification. He wanted to change the latter into the former. In other words, he wanted to turn the silent dagger into a very noisy dagger. Not because that would be very useful, but to prove that he was capable of modifying enchantments. After studying the spellweave of the silver bell for many days, Sonny was close to memorizing the staggering complexity of the pattern of strings entirely. Since the bell had only 1 enchantment, it was easy to isolate it from the parts of the pattern that were common to all memories. So, in theory, he knew what shape to create. The dagger, on the other hand, was a bit different. It also only had a single enchantment and a single ember anchoring the pattern, but that ember was brighter, and the pattern itself was much larger and more intricate. However, there were certain similarities with the one in the bell. So, Sonny could imagine turning one into another. He hesitated for a while, then sighed and raised Weaver's needle. Just like on the day he had found it, the long and narrow needle was enveloped in a faint, weak golden shine that only he could see. Thousands of years ago, or maybe sometime in the future, it had absorbed some of Weaver's deific blood, along with tiny traces of divinity. Sonny suspected that the needle had not been a magical tool, and neither had it actually belonged to Weaver. Rather, it had been just a random needle that the demon of fate found in the ebony tower and made use of to sew a new arm to their body, and its magical properties came from being washed in the demon's blood. However, now, the needle did possess magical properties. Just like Sunny's fingers, it was capable of interacting with the ephemeral strings that constituted spellweaves. Sunny threaded a shadow string through the needle and carefully thrust it into the sorceress pattern that created the enchantment of the silent dagger. He was hoping to replace some of the existing strings with his own, shift others around, and remove some completely. At first, everything went well. Sunny was on the verge of getting excited. But then, the same thing that happened with all his previous experiments repeated itself. At some point, the strings trembled, and then the whole pattern tore and collapsed, turning into a chaotic mess of ripped and fluttering threads. Sunny hurriedly retracted his hand, afraid to lose it, and watched as the slim dagger shimmered and disintegrated into a rain of dim sparks. A few moments later, the spell spoke solemnly.
Your memory has been destroyed.
Sunny grimaced and closed his eyes. Sunny cursed the loss of another memory. Then, however, he suddenly shifted and turned his head up, staring at the stone surface above him as if trying to pierce its solid mass with his gaze. Up above, on the surface of the small island, one of his shadows had noticed movement. The grass covering the surface of the island moved, and strange shapes appeared from beneath it. Some were similar to each other, while some were not, but all shared the same deep emerald color. The shapes levitated upward, slowly coalescing together. The creepy shadow observed the eerie event from the shade of a large boulder, darkly excited. Sunny only understood what it was so excited about when the boulder suddenly split open and fell apart, making way for another of the shapes. This one easily recognizable. It was a massive emerald jawbone, similar to a human one in all aspects except for size. The creepy guy had always been strangely fascinated by dead things. No wonder he got fixated on a bunch of flying bones. As Sunny watched, the emerald bones assembled into a towering human skeleton, very similar to the powerful abomination of the same kind Sunny had fought and destroyed in the Red Colosseum, but much larger and way more frightening. The emerald skeleton stared north for a while, and then slowly headed toward the edge of the island, each of its steps making the ground shake. At the same time, a loud rattle of the heavenly chain rolled through the two skies. Sunny was so used to hearing them that he didn't pay it any attention at first, but then a deep frown appeared on his face. Something wasn't right. The rattling of the chain sounded different somehow. He lingered for a few moments, then silently dove into the shadows and glided to the northern slope of the flying isle. As soon as Sunny saw the heavenly chain stretching far into the distance, his heart grew cold. A terrifying abomination with a body that resembled a dirty mass of pitch-black tar was crawling underneath it, its back facing the sky below. Each second, a dozen tendrils of liquid darkness shot forward from the mass, sticking to the links of the giant chain and pulling the creature forward. The monstrosity was at least 20 meters long and so heavy that the iron of the heavenly tether groaned under its weight. Sunny wondered what hellish nightmare this was. Sunny peered beneath the surface of the black tar creature and shuddered once he saw the taint of corruption that hid within its soul. The two hideous nodes of swirling darkness that spread cancerous veins through the body of the abomination were especially ripe and horrid, revealing its rank. Sunny identified it as a corrupted monster. Earlier, when he had been passing the islands north of his current shelter, he had felt the shadow of a powerful fiend hiding beneath one of them. Who knew that the horror nesting on the dark side of the flying island would turn out to be equal to the harrowing wormvein, and then decide to follow Sunny south on top of that? As Sunny froze for a moment, a large boulder suddenly flew from the island and hit the massive body of the black tar fiend, sending ripples across its liquid flesh. The force of the impact was so great that a destructive shockwave spread in all directions, causing the heavenly chain to rattle even louder. On the surface of the island, the towering emerald skeleton lowered its arms and stared at the invading horror, dark lights igniting in the pits of its empty eye sockets. The boulder it had just thrown disappeared within the body of the corrupted abomination, seemingly dealing it no damage. The creature simply continued crawling, its massive body surging forward like a black tide. Sunny decided he probably needed to run. But before he could do anything, the advancing monster suddenly convulsed, and in the next second, dozens of sharp stone shards shot out of its flesh, each covered by fetid black liquid. Some rained on the emerald skeleton, and some hit the slopes of the island, causing large chunks of weathered stone to be turned into dust. Sunny barely managed to dodge one of them, and stared with resentment at the small crater that appeared in place of his hiding place. Sure, he was an incorporeal shadow right now, but he would not make the mistake of assuming that a corrupted abomination had no way of wounding him. Who knew what this horror was capable of? And just as this thought entered his mind, he noticed that there was a thin layer of black tar spread around the point of impact, and dozens of similar ones nearby. As he watched, the foul liquid started to move, coalescing into small dark blobs. Some of them began crawling up toward the emerald skeleton. Some froze for a moment, and then flowed toward him as though sensing his location. Sunny cursed. Sunny hurriedly summoned back the creepy shadow and lunged away, gliding through the shadows as fast as he could. By the time he reached the bottom of the island, the black tar monster was already upon the skeleton. Numerous tendrils of darkness shot forward, enveloping the towering abomination. Despite all its might, the emerald skeleton was instantly trapped and pulled inside the mass of liquid darkness. It struggled desperately, but to no avail. Seconds later, its massive figure disappeared within the body of the dark side fiend without a trace.
Now just forget about me, Hellspawn. I'm too small and inconsequential anyway.
Sunny was already on the southern slope of the island, rushing toward the other heavenly chain that led away from this damned place. Somewhere above him, the giant mass of liquid darkness rippled, perhaps grinding the ancient emerald bones into dust. And then the corrupted fiend suddenly surged forward with incredible speed, heading for the very same chain. Or rather, for the swift shadow that hoped to use the chain to escape. Luckily, Sunny reached it first. He burst from the shadows, flying across the span of empty air, and landed on the surface of the heavenly tether in a roll. Without wasting a single moment, Sunny pushed himself off of the cold iron surface with all four arms, wrapped the shadows around his body, and ran. As dull pain spread through his chest, the mantle of the underworld turned as light as a feather. Just a few seconds later, the chain swayed wildly beneath his feet, announcing that the black tar monster had reached it too. Sunny cursed. There were a few hundred meters of giant sunlit links in front of him, and only past that was the heavenly tether submerged into the darkness of the sky below and shrouded in shadows. Sunny told himself he would make it.
I'll make it, surely I will.
Sunny growled, bared his fangs, and ran. Sunny's upper arms were much longer than that of a human. Bending down, he fell on all fours and broke into a bestial gallop, flying forward with incredible speed. With each jump, the saving darkness grew closer and closer. The links of the heavenly chain rattled and swayed wildly beneath him as the black tar fiend pursued. Sunny could have tried to find safety in the depth of the sky below, but his speed and maneuverability in the air would have been severely diminished. If the abomination decided to expel another rain of tar-covered projectiles, he would be shredded, torn to pieces, and consumed. Besides, there was no saying if the harrowing creature could follow him into the abyss. His best chance was to reach the segment of the chain submerged in darkness, glide across it as a swift shadow, and escape to the next island. Behind him, the mass of liquid darkness rolled forward with staggering speed. Hundreds of black tendrils shooting out of it every moment to form a ceaseless tide. The distance between them grew smaller and smaller and smaller still. Sunny prayed to the gods. Just a split seconds before the tendrils of darkness descended upon him, Sunny finally reached a sufficiently low altitude and dove into the shadows, turning into one of them and rushing forward across the giant chain. The space where he stood just a moment ago was instantly enveloped by the foul flesh of the tar monstrosity, which then lunged after him, somehow starting to move even faster. A strange, deafening sound that resembled a gurgling wail escaped from the depths of the mass of liquid darkness, causing Sunny's whole being to writhe in pain. It washed over the world like a wave, penetrating deep into the darkness of the sky below and the radiance of the sky above, and making both shudder. Sunny fled across the border between two skies, and the harrowing creature from the dark side followed. Soon, the length of the heavenly chain that was shrouded in shadows came to the end, and he escaped them at a terrible speed, sliding across the metal of the links and barely keeping himself from plummeting down. A tide of black, shifting tendrils fell at him almost instantly, but hit only ancient iron. Sunny had stepped through shadows, appearing a couple of dozen meters away, and then once again, teleporting to the surface of the island that loomed above him now. That last jump ate a lot of his essence, but he had no other choice than to make it. Falling to the ground, Sunny grabbed at his chest, which was pulsating with dull, crippling pain, and groaned. Then he threw himself up and continued running. Behind him, the tendrils of black tar were already above the edge of the island. Sunny found himself among remnants of an ancient battlefield. Carcasses of broken ships lay forlornly on the barren earth, their blackened hulls covered with scorch marks and gaping with empty darkness. Here and there, pieces of rusty weapons and armor protruded from the ground covered with ash. The ground itself was shattered and uneven, littered with pockmarks of deep craters. Knowing that he would never escape the giant fiend on foot, Sunny alternated between galloping and jumping through shadows for short distances, sometimes chaining several jumps in a row. By exerting every fiber of his demonic body to its limit, he managed to stay ahead of the pursuing abomination for now, even if it was just barely. Behind him, the monstrous creature barreled through wreckages of the fallen ships, breaking them apart with a thunderous cacophony of crashes. Its tendrils ripped the wooden hulls apart like paper, sending clouds of ash and debris flying through the air. On the opposite side of the island, Sunny saw the remnants of a colossal pyre. Thousands upon thousands of charred human bones arranged into a solemn pyramid to form it. These were, perhaps, the remains of the warriors that had fought in this battle and once crewed the broken ships. What had brought them to this island, and what had they fought for? Who had won the terrible battle, and at what cost? Had this pyre been meant to honor fallen heroes or dispose of dead enemies, or even prisoners, perhaps? Without sparing a single thought to these questions, he dove down from the edge and fell through the air, reaching another chain and escaping further south. A few moments later, the corrupted fiend flowed over the edge as well, landing at the heavenly tether with a deafening thud. Sunny was still ahead. The fiend failed to outrun him. For now, the problem was that Sunny was growing tired and slowly running out of shadow essence, while the black tar monster was not. South, south, south. Pursued by the fiend from the dark side, Sunny fled south, crossing one island after another. But no matter how fast he ran, the damned monstrosity was faster. Many of the islands he traversed were populated by nightmare creatures of all kinds, but unlike the towering emerald skeleton, these ones did not even try to fight the corrupted abomination. Instead, they fled too, scattering to the neighboring islands in something that resembled panic or being consumed if they were not swift enough. At some point, Sunny found himself running side by side with all kinds of nightmare creatures that would have usually not hesitated to attack him. They were like forest animals escaping from a raging fire. When a forest fire spread like an insatiable monster, devouring all in its way, predators and prey were made equal before its terrifying strength. Besides, with his monstrous body and his mind still clouded by the countless times he had shadowed the abominations of all kinds in the Red Colosseum, Sunny was less unlike the nightmare creatures than he had used to be. The black tar monster, however, was making a clear distinction between him and all the other creatures. It only paid attention to those abominations that were directly in its way, while its only goal for some damned reason was singular: to catch and consume Sunny. Sunny cursed and wondered what was so special about him.
Curse it all, what's so special about me?
Was it the fact that he followed the path of ascension instead of corruption? Was it his nature as a shadow? Or maybe, was it the flame of divinity that burned in his soul and flowed through his veins? Was that flame an irresistible lure for a creature like that? There was no answer. All Sunny could do was run, run, run. Run as his chest became consumed with pain and his soul became empty and barren, devoid of any essence at all. Some time later, he escaped from the shadows one last time and fell on the emerald grass of a new island, almost completely spent of essence and sapped of all stamina. He was done for. His single heart was beating wildly in his aching chest, drowning as it tried to do the work meant for two. His 4 lungs were on fire. This was it. This was as far as he could go. Sunny drew in a hoarse breath and then slowly rose to his feet. His eyes shone with grim darkness.
So be it. Good, come and get me, beast. Let us see which one of us is stronger. I have killed creatures mightier than you before.
Granted, during the battle with Wormvang, he had months of preparations and a whole cohort of fire keepers supporting him. Sunny used the last of his essence to summon the cruel sight and turned around ready to face the assault of the black tendrils. However, something was off. Sunny made a confused sound, the rattling of the heavenly chains. It had grown quiet. He frowned, then took a few steps toward the edge of the island and looked down. The black tar monster was some distance away, its massive body hanging motionlessly from the heavenly tether. It was frozen and unmoving, with only its tendrils pulsating in a bizarre and nauseating rhythm. The abomination seemed to be reluctant to approach this particular island. It was as though there was an invisible boundary that it refused to cross for some reason. Sunny stared at the harrowing creature for a few moments, and then snarled. He had escaped an inescapable situation once again. He had successfully fled the pursuit of the terrifying fiend. It seemed that luck was on his side in the end. However, was it really? Sunny shivered.
But what exactly can scare a corrupted monster away?
Sunny stared at the terrifying fiend for a few moments, then suddenly grimaced, clutched his chest, and fell to one knee. A bestial growl escaped through his sharp fangs. Sunny let out a ragged groan of pain. His heart was beating wildly, sending waves of pain rolling through his exhausted body. He felt weak and lightheaded, beads of sweat glistening on his obsidian skin. This condition was only worsened by the usual sense of frailty that came from utterly depleting reserves of essence. Sunny felt infirm. He gasped and cursed, demanding to know whether he was having a heart attack. He groaned, remained motionless for a bit, and then slowly stood up. Still clutching his chest, he hunched awkwardly and looked around, trying to determine which island he had found himself on, and what wicked creature might have kept the corrupted monstrosity at bay. His pupils widened slightly, and Sunny breathed the words, "No way." The night was slowly advancing, and the island was drowned by the dimming resplendence of a beautiful crimson sunset. Despite only having been here once, Sunny recognized the place. The vastness of the island, the emerald grass that veiled its surface like a soft carpet, the rolling hills, the moss-covered ruins. He had reached the southern island, where the crumbling fortress lay at the estuary of the Great Chain, one of the anchors which connected the isles to the mainland of the dream realm far below. Well, the fortress had been ruined in the future. Currently, it might have been still standing. Such luck! Sunny was glad to learn that he had arrived at the southernmost point of the Chained Isles during his mad escape from the Black Tar Fiend. However, he was still uneasy about the fact that the abomination refused to approach it. He was in no condition to fight anything, let alone a creature capable of scaring a corrupted monster. But what choice was there? Sunny glanced at the massive body of the terrifying abomination that loomed in the distance, then toward the center of the island. The choices really were simple. He could either jump back on the heavenly chain and try his luck in a battle against the Black Tar Fiend, or remain on the island and risk meeting the unknown horror. He hesitated for a bit and then started limping away from the edge. Yes, an unknown danger was almost always worse than that which was familiar. But who knew? Maybe he was going to get lucky. Maybe the unseen horror was going to turn out friendly and nice. Sunny muttered to himself, reasoning that statistically speaking, a thing like that was bound to happen one day. By the time Sunny reached the center of the island, the night had already descended upon the world, and a full moon was climbing up the velvet surface of the starlit sky. The hills became shrouded in darkness, which hid and protected him, and there was a little bit of shadow essence, now filling his 3 cores. The pain in his chest had subsided somewhat, but Sunny still felt weak and feverish. He was heading toward the southern edge of the island to take a look at the current status of the boundary fortress, and studied his surroundings carefully in search of any sign of danger. If there was indeed a terrible threat somewhere on the island, it would be better to discover it before it had the chance to discover him first. Cresting the top of a tall hill, Sunny suddenly froze, and then crouched down. Safely veiled by the shadows, he looked at a shimmering white light that danced some distance away. In the center of a small valley that was formed by the hill he was standing on and several others, Sunny whispered, asking what it was. He hesitated for a moment, then commanded the gloomy shadow to slide off from his body and get closer to the source of light. However, the shadow hesitated too. Sunny blinked, then hissed at the shadow, demanding to know what the hell it was waiting for, telling it to get down there and that it could run away if things went wrong. The gloomy shadow gave him a long look, then shook its head resentfully and timidly glided forward. Soon, Sunny saw a strange picture. In the center of the valley, a small fire burned, its color entirely white. In front of it, a lone human figure sat. The human's head was hung low, his face obscured by the falling hair. He was naked above the waist, his pale skin covered with dry blood. However, there seemed to be no wounds on the stranger's body. In fact, there was not a single scar on it. On a stone in front of him, a diamond sickle lay, its blade painted crimson. The image of the bloodied man, half of his body illuminated by the warm light of the dancing flame, half washed in the cold pale moonlight, was eerie and strangely beautiful. Sunny found himself slightly hypnotized by the solemn mystery of it all, almost to the point of forgetting the danger he was in. After a while, the man let out a deep sigh, and then, suddenly, spoke in a bright and melodious voice.
Who is it there hiding in the shadows? Don't be so timid, friend. Come out, share the warmth of this fire with me if you wish. The night is cold and dark.
A sonorous laughter rolled across the valley.
Oh, don't be scared, I won't eat you.
Sunny shivered, then snapped at Noctis to keep his voice down, warning that there was something horrible hiding on the island. But then he thought for a moment and shuddered. Unless the man himself was the unknown horror. The horror in question, meanwhile, raised his head, finally revealing his face. It was young and beautiful, with smooth silken skin, high cheekbones, and exquisite features. The man's smile was carefree and pleasant, his eyes bright and humorous. There was a symbol of a crescent moon drawn on his forehead. Sunny recognized him immediately, of course. It was the exact same face he had seen 1,000 times, depicted on each of the miraculous coins. However, Sunny had no time to pay this revelation any attention, because something else drew all of it. It was the fact that the young man shifted slightly, turned his head, and looked directly at him. Not even at the gloomy shadow that hid some distance away from the fire, but at the distant top of the hill where Sunny himself crouched in the shadows. Sunny cursed under his breath and stammered out a startled curse. The young man beckoned him with a finger, still smiling.
Come, come, it is rude to refuse a sincere invitation, especially one coming from such a nice person as me. Oh, where are my manners? I didn't even introduce myself. Rejoice, stranger. You are in the brilliant presence of Noctis, the great sorcerer of the East.
Sunny froze, unsure of what the wisest course of action would be, and muttered to himself, wondering what to do. After meeting Solving, he had a heavy prejudice against crossing paths with powerful figures of the Kingdom of Hope, and Noctis was very powerful. Of that, he had no doubt. In fact, Sunny was pretty sure that the friendly young man who was looking at him with a charming smile was none other than one of the 7 immortals, shackle of the imprisoned demon, the mysterious Lord of the East. Even without taking into account the otherworldly presence that all transcendents seemed to possess, it was easy to tell there was vast and dreadful power within Noctis, hiding behind the deceptively carefree gleam of his lustrous eyes. Plus, there was a citadel in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles, literally called the Sanctuary of Noctis. Who else could have been the ruler there? Who else could have possessed the beautiful flying ship and had their image put on the miraculous coins? So Sunny had no desire to meet the strange immortal, even though Noctis seemed weirdly friendly and unthreatening. Actually, that only made him more terrifying. But was there even a choice? It was not like Sunny was in any shape to escape from a saint, let alone an immortal sorcerer that even corrupted abominations seemed to be wary of. He hesitated for a bit, then sighed, rose, and headed toward the crackling fire. Noticing that, Noctis hummed in satisfaction and then slightly moved his hand. Immediately, droplets of dew flew from the grass, forming a clear stream that swirled around his body, washing the dry blood away. An exquisite silk cloak rose from the ground, wrapping itself around him. The diamond sickle whistled through the air, shaking itself clean, and hung itself on the sorcerer's belt. Sunny continued walking, still clutching his aching chest, and observed the bizarre occurrence with a deadpan expression, grumbling that he wished he knew how to perform tricks like that, since it would make life so much easier. Finally, under the gloating gaze of the vindictive gloomy shadow, he walked into the circle of light and couldn't help but tremble when the saint threw a curious glance at him. It was hard to remain calm in front of a being that could obliterate you with one finger. The whole situation was sort of ridiculous actually. Noctis looked like a pampered young man in bright silks, with an effeminate face and the body of someone who had never once exerted themselves physically. His hands were smooth and uncalloused, and his build was slender and soft, almost frail. Sunny, on the other hand, was a towering demon clad in an intricate and fearsome suit of onyx armor, his gaunt figure brimming with ferocious might. He had twisting horns, 4 powerful arms, and a mouth full of sharp fangs, his eyes completely black and inhuman. And yet, it was the demon who was afraid of the pampered young man, and not the other way around. Ridiculous. Noctis studied the tenebrous demon in front of him, his smile growing wider.
Ah, what a fortuitous encounter, a shadow. Did fate guide you to me, I wonder?
Sunny grew very still, wondering what Noctis meant by fate. The sorcerer, meanwhile, gestured for him to sit.
Sit down, Shadow. It seems that you are unwell. Rest for a bit and warm yourself.
Sunny hesitated, then lowered himself to the ground, sitting across the dancing flames from the transcendent. He gleaned at Noctis' soul to make sure that he was right to call the young man so, and saw a single resplendent core shining in his chest. That was a soul of a saint, indeed. Noctis remained silent for a while and then asked,
Say, Shadow, what is your name?
Sunny lingered, then stretched a hand forward and scratched 2 runes into one of the stones surrounding the fire. Sorcerer's brows flew up.
Those runes, huh? Goodness gracious. Now I am sad that I wasn't as studious as my mentors demanded all that time ago, those boring charlatans. Well, let's see. Star. No, that should be sun. Lost sun. Absence of sun. Sunless.
Sunny nodded, causing Noctis to beam with a prideful grin.
Huh? There's indeed no one smarter than me in the kingdom of hope. The rumors are true. Well, of course they are true. I'm the one who paid storytellers to spread them. In any case, Sunless, what a fitting name you have. Truly a name worthy of a shadow. A little on the nose, if you ask me, but very nice nevertheless. Well done.
Sunny tilted his head, staring at the saint in confusion, wondering whether this guy was just eccentric or completely insane. Noctis didn't mind being stared at, and instead seemed to enjoy it a great deal. He looked at the onyx demon in return, the smile frozen on his face. The humor in his eyes slowly disappeared, making way for a strange, dangerous gleam.
Sunless, since fate itself has brought us together, can you answer me a simple question?
Feeling tension spreading through his exhausted body, Sunny grew grim, and then slowly nodded, thinking that this was not good at all, and cursing the fact that everyone in this place was crazy. Noctis leaned forward and said, his voice deceptively calm and friendly.
Tell me, do you perhaps have a knife cut from a single piece of black obsidian in your possession?
Sunny shivered, wondering how the hell Noctis could know, but there was nothing he could do. The question had been asked, and now he was compelled to answer. He struggled against the flaw for as long as he could, then gritted his teeth and nodded again. The immortal sorcerer stared at Sunny for a few moments, his lustrous eyes reflecting moonlight like two shining pools of pale blue radiance. Then, he suddenly threw his head back and exploded with joyful laughter. As though he had just heard the funniest joke in history, Noctis laughed so hard that tears appeared in his eyes, glistening in the moonlight like crystals. Finally, he satiated his mirth and glanced at Sunny once again, the carefree smile returning to his face.
Our Sunless, fate is the funniest thing in the world, don't you think? You and I have a feeling that we are going to be great friends, Sunless. Believe it.
Sunny froze, his tired body tensing up. His vertical pupils narrowed, and breath escaped through his gritted fangs with a hissing sound. Sunny cursed under his breath. Despite the strange reactions of the eccentric saint, he wasn't fooled. Out here in the Kingdom of Hope, there was no power greater than that of the immortal wardens that guarded its imprisoned queen. And the only weakness the immortals had were the knives that held their fates hostage. The obsidian knife was a weapon that could destroy one of the eternal shackles, and as such, it was a priceless treasure. The very concept of value was too mundane and pedestrian to be applied to it, and he had just revealed the fact that he possessed one to an infinitely more powerful being, to one of the very immortals whose lives the knife could reap. It didn't matter if the obsidian knife was meant for Noctis himself or one of the other shackles, if it contained his own fate. Then the sorcerer would stop at nothing to gain control of it, so that no one else could. If it contained another's, he would be able to exert influence over one of the wardens or dispose of them completely. Noctis would undoubtedly try to take the knife. But inexplicably, the sorcerer did nothing of the sort. Instead, as Sunny stared at him in confusion, Noctis relaxed and started to hum a joyful melody. Then he suddenly clapped his hands in excitement.
Ah, Sunless, how fortunate it is that I've met you.
His smile dimmed a little, and his eyes, for a moment, grew dark and terrifying.
Before we met, you see, I was prepared to do something rather drastic, but now there is no need. The divination truly worked.
He remained silent for a few moments, and then seamlessly switched back to his usual carefree persona.
This wonderful occasion demands a celebration. Yes, we simply must celebrate while you're still alive, which won't be for long, regretfully, so better keep it simple.
Sunny flinched. What? Meanwhile, something rustled in the air, and a figure of a very tall man suddenly appeared out of the darkness. Sunny tensed, surprised that the stranger managed to approach them unnoticed. Why had he not sensed the bastard? The figure calmly stepped into the light, revealing itself to not be a man at all. Instead, it was a wooden mannequin carved into a semblance of a man, wearing an elegant livery with embroidered sleeves and hem. It had simple features and held a tray with grapes, fresh fruit, and several beautifully painted amphoras of wine. The mannequin looked disturbingly familiar. In fact, it bore a close resemblance to a far less feral, ancient, and corrupted version of a sailor doll, who had been the nightmare creatures populating Shipwreck Island before Sunny and the Fire Keepers eradicated them. The strange sailor doll placed the tray in front of them, stepped back into the darkness and froze, becoming undistinguishable from a dead piece of wood. Noctis smiled and reached out for one of the amphoras. Sunny's thoughts, meanwhile, were in turmoil. What the hell does he mean? I won't be alive for long. He opened his mouth, then closed it in frustration and hurriedly traced several runes in the ash, asking what and why. The sorcerer scowled as he tried to read them, then gave him an unapologetic smile.
Why are we keeping it so simple? Yes, of course, you would be confused. See, usually I would have thrown a great feast to celebrate the occasion. I am the most gracious person in the Kingdom of Hope, after all. But sadly, we will have to be satisfied with this shameful.
Sunny furiously shook his head, and then drew several more runes, tracing the words sunless, death, and why. Noctis stared at him with surprise.
Well, aren't you dying? That broken heart of yours is giving out. I thought that this was why you came here, to spend your last few days near his resting place.
Sunny blinked a few times, trying to digest what he had just heard. Was his one remaining heart really failing? It did feel like it was on the verge of tearing apart during his escape from the black tar monster. It continued to ache dully still. And whose resting place was Noctis talking about? No, that was not important right now. He erased the previous runes and traced 2 more, carving the words heart and broken. Noctis frowned.
Wait, do you perhaps not want to die? I didn't say anything before in order to respect your wishes, but if dying peacefully was not your intention, then why are you wasting time drinking wine with me, Sunless? Are you crazy?
Sunny stared at him for a few moments, unamused, his eyes full of resentment. Then he ground his fangs and wrote, etching the words no, don't know, maybe, heart and heal. The sorcerer scratched his head.
You are a very strange shadow, Sunless. Well, mending a broken heart is not easy, and yours is not only broken, you also seem to have misplaced one. Until you replace the lost heart, there is no point in healing the one that remains. It will just break apart again. But where would a shadow creature like you find a suitable heart in this godforsaken land?
He sighed.
The servants of shadow are all gone, and so are the servants of heart. Without them, only the greatest of healers would be able to build a heart worthy of a shadow demon from scratch.
Noctis looked down dejectedly, but then a mischievous smile appeared on his face.
Luckily, I am the most gifted and renowned healer in the Kingdom of Hope. For me, creating a new heart for you won't be much of a problem, but Sunless, despite the fact that you and I are dear friends, a favor like that is not something to be given lightly. I wouldn't want to put a strain on our friendship, you know, so you will have to do something for me too. That would only be polite, don't you think?
Sunny had a feeling that he was being swindled. After all, he was an accomplished swindler himself. However, that didn't really matter. The part of Noctis's words about the inevitable failure of his one remaining heart at least rang true. Perhaps if Sunny managed to not put any excessive strain on it in the future, things would be fine. But what were the chances of him having a peaceful life in a nightmare? 0. He desperately needed a functioning heart, and better yet, 2 of them. Only then would he be back to his full strength and ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Sunny sighed and drew several runes, already suspecting what he would hear. He suspected Noctis wanted the damned knife, calling him a bastard under his breath, and wrote the words sunless, do, and what. Noctis looked at him for a few moments, then smiled. What he said next, however, was not what Sunny expected to hear. The sorcerer suddenly turned around and gestured south.
Oh, it's nothing much, really. You see, there's an abandoned fortress on the edge of this island. All I want is for you to climb inside and remain there until dawn. Actually, it will be best if you can fall asleep, so a little nap in exchange for a new heart. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? I mean, it's just a few hours of sleep. Really, what's the worst that could happen?
The gloomy shadow grabbed its head in utter despair. Sunny remained silent for a long time, looking at Noctis with a grim expression. Finally, he shifted and drew several runes, the onyx claw of his armored gauntlet moving through the ash with swift precision, carving the words fortress, danger, and inside. The sorcerer laughed.
Danger? Of course there is danger, but don't worry, it is nothing that you won't be able to handle. I think, believe, even. Regardless, there's no one in the entire Kingdom of Hope better suited for this task, thank you, Sunless. So, hurry up, time's a-wasting.
Sunny scowled, unamused by the fact that Noctis avoided the question. Unwilling to let go, he growled and pointed to the runes again. The sorcerer sighed wistfully.
It's not that I don't want to tell you, Sunless, it's just that there's no point. You won't remember anyway, but this will benefit us both, trust me. This fortress once belonged to a friend of mine. He was one of Hope's shackles just like me and a shadow just like you. Do you see now why I think that fate itself has brought us together?
Sunny held his breath. So, I was right. Noctis is indeed one of the immortals. And more than that, one of the original 7 had been a follower of Shadow God. Only 5 wardens were still alive, and none of them held dominion over the south. So, it was safe to assume that this Shadow Lord was dead. Suddenly, the sorcerer's comment about this island being someone's resting place made more sense. If so, maybe there were some relics that the Transcendent of Shadows left behind in the fortress. That changed things, a little. Sunny hesitated for a while and then gestured to his chest. Noctis smiled.
What? Surely you are not doubting my skill. Rest assured, Sunless, I'll create a wonderful new heart for you. I'll even replace the fingers you seem to be missing as a bonus. Unless not having fingers is your preference, of course.
Sunny stared at him for a few minutes, then sighed and stood up. Picking up a bunch of grapes, he glanced at the eccentric sorcerer one more time and then headed south toward the edge of the island where the abandoned fortress stood. You won't remember it anyway. I wonder what the hell did he mean? As he walked, Sunny noticed several clusters of beautiful white flowers growing here and there among the emerald grass. The closer to the fortress he came, the more of these flowers there were. Despite the fact that it was the middle of the night, their buds were open, filling the air with a faint but pleasant smell. A deep scowl appeared on his face, and Sunny murmured about the flowers. They looked vaguely familiar. He slowly ate the sweet, succulent grapes and searched his memory for a hint of where he might have seen them. After a while, his expression turned even darker. There was an island in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles, not too far from the sanctuary of Noctis, covered by a vast and beautiful field of such white flowers. Everyone, even the most competent cohorts of Awakened and those from the White Feather clan, avoided this island like a plague. The ground there was littered with bones of all kinds, hidden beneath the delicate white petals. As soon as a person stepped on the surface of the island, they would feel an irresistible desire to stop, rest, and fall asleep. And if they succumbed to that desire, none ever woke up. Sunny silently cursed, then growled, asking if that bastard was trying to kill him. But for some reason, he had trouble believing that Noctis simply wanted him dead. A saint had far easier ways to kill an Awakened, let alone someone as tired and weakened as him. There was no need to go to such lengths, so what the sorcerer had said must have been true or at least close to it. He believed that Sunny was uniquely suited for the task and had a good chance of accomplishing it alive. But why? What was so special about Sunny? What could he do that even a transcendent could not? Was it because he was connected to Shadow God, as the previous owner of the fortress had been? Full of dark thoughts, he crested another hill and saw the familiar silhouette of the Boundary stronghold not too far away. It was in much better condition than it had been in the future. In fact, it almost looked whole. If not for the moss covering its walls, the lack of lights, and the deathly silence that enveloped it, Sunny would have thought that the castle was still inhabited by humans. The tall walls built of gray stone rose high into the night sky, and the massive gates were closed shut. The ancient fortress was bathed in the pale moonlight, looking somber and foreboding like a cursed tomb. Sunny grimaced. Not ominous at all. Still clutching his chest, he made his way down the hill and approached the menacing stronghold. Its walls had not crumbled yet, so the path he had taken to get inside the last time did not exist yet. Full of grim unease, Sunny thrust his claws into the ancient stone and started climbing. These walls were nothing compared to the Great Wall of the Dark City. Getting to the top was not going to be hard, even for a human. And currently, he wasn't even human. He was a demon. Be it a dying one. Soon, he finally reached the top of the wall and crouched on its lip, looking down into the empty courtyard. Here, the signs of abandonment were more pronounced. There were dust and dirt everywhere, with weeds growing through the ancient cobblestones. The fortress was desolate and hollow, devoid of anyone to inhabit and take care of it. He hesitated with a decision for a bit, and then reluctantly sent two of his shadows away to explore the stronghold. If there was indeed a powerful creature nesting inside, they would surely find it. Minutes passed in tense anticipation. The shadows glided through the empty corridors and halls of the abandoned stronghold, through its towers and dungeons. However, no matter where they looked, they did not find any sign of life. What they did find, however, were corpses. Here and there, human skeletons lay, still dressed in archaic garments and armor. There was no sign of struggle around them, no tears on their clothes, and no apparent wounds on their bodies. It just seemed as though the former garrison of the stronghold had lowered themselves to the ground and died for no reason whatsoever. All of it was just too eerie. Sunny cursed, cursing the damned immortals and the damned place. Sonny almost turned around and ran, but then his chest pulsed with pain, reminding him of the reason for why he had come here. With a deep sigh, he jumped down from the lip of the wall and walked toward the main structure of the fortress. Muttering that it was time to find a soft bed, Sonny entered the donjon, summoned the shadows back, and walked through the silent halls on his way to the higher levels of the massive tower. Once there, he walked around for a bit, searching for a suitable room, and soon found one that seemed to be both comfortable and well protected. Unceremoniously throwing a corpse in a rotten nightgown off the bed, he lay down in its place and tiredly closed his eyes. Sure, this place was beyond creepy, but he was, in fact, tired to the bone and in desperate need of rest. Some sleep would do him good. Sonny mumbled that it was no big deal and that he had slept in far worse places. Before falling into the embrace of oblivion, he summoned Saint from the shadows and gave her a mental command to watch over him. After hesitating for a bit, Sonny did the same with the soul serpent. Only once the two shadows assumed guard did he allow himself to relax. In the silence of the abandoned fortress, Sonny could easily hear the strained beating of his heart. However, he was too exhausted to pay it any attention. Just a few minutes later, he was already sound asleep. And just a moment before falling into deep slumber, with his mind already half gone, he thought that he heard an unexpected sound somewhere close, but also far away. It was like the ringing of hooves on the cold stone floors. Sonny woke up just before dawn. He lay still for a while, reluctant to leave the warm embrace of the blankets. Then, with a sigh, he sat up and shivered in the morning cold. It was time to face a new day, and there was a lot to do. He had no excuses to laze about. A dull pain suddenly radiated through his chest. He looked down with a confused expression, studying the old scars covering his tan, bronze skin. I guess it's going to rain. Then an ivory arm suddenly appeared from beneath the blankets, caressing his firm muscles, and Sonny murmured, asking if it was morning already. Sonny smiled, grasped the hand of his wife, and nodded, replying that yes, it was my sunshine. She sighed, and Sonny said all right, telling her to go and get ready, and that he would wake up the little devil. He remained motionless, leisurely enjoying the sight of the beauty he had somehow managed to coax into marrying a ruffian like him dressing herself. Careful not to disturb the round belly where their second child slept peacefully, with not a care in the world. His smile grew a little wider, and Sonny called out, telling the little devil to go and that today was not the day for mischief, asking whether the hoodlum had forgotten. Sonny made a dejected face, then rose and dressed as well. When he left their quarters, the servants were already hard at work preparing for the day. When they saw him, each bowed respectfully and greeted him with warm voices. Being subjected to all this adoration and decorum, Sonny had to put on a face worthy of a lord, as well muttering about how bothersome it was. The servants were going to prepare everything for the upcoming journey, but one thing he had to do himself. That was something that Sonny would not allow anyone else to perform, not for the lack of trust, but simply because it was his duty. Entering the stables, he greeted his steed and went about feeding and watering the noble beast before putting the saddle on his wide back. Sonny might have become a lord of some renown and left his turbulent past behind, but the bond between a warrior and his horse was sacred. Just because the two of them didn't have to risk their lives on a battlefield anymore didn't mean that he would forget it. When all was done, he led the horse to the courtyard and attached the weathered wooden scabbard to the saddle, the cold steel of a beautiful sword hidden safely within. Then he stared at the scabbard for some time, massaging his aching chest with a distant expression. A subtle, dark expression appeared on his face. After a while, the sound of quick steps headed his way, and his son called out to him, saying, "Dad." Sonny turned around and grinned as he caught his son in an iron embrace, laughing and telling the boy that he was trying to sneak up on his poor old father, and that he was not so fast. Since Sonny had been sneaking up on monsters long before the boy was born, brat, the boy giggled and then took a step back. He was turning 7 today, and on that occasion, his mother had dressed him in the best clothes they had. The little devil almost looked like a proper child, and not a corrupted abomination sent to the mortal realm to torture his helpless parents. The boy teased his father, asking why he had to sneak up, and whether he was too weak to kill them outright, Sunny sighed in exasperation and stared at the heavens, groaning for the lady to help him. Why did their son have to inherit his poisonous tongue as well? The boy, meanwhile, turned around and looked into the distance, where the beautiful silhouette of the ivory tower could already be seen in the morning haze. His eyes widened, and the boy asked his dad whether it was true and whether he was going to see her today, the lady. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then nodded, answering of course, and that the boy was turning 7, was he not, and that today was a divine day, so he would meet their goddess to introduce himself and pledge himself to her service. His son frowned and asked whether she wasn't really a goddess, and whether the other gods wouldn't be angry with him. Sunny laughed, replying about gods, and that gods were too great and mighty to know what jealousy meant, kid, and asking why they would mind, since Lady Hope gave them shelter and safety, protecting them from the corruption from war, famine, plague, and even themselves, and that if that was not something worthy of worship, then he didn't know what was. With that, he jumped into the saddle, and then lifted the boy to sit in front of him, calling out, "Let's go." They left the manor and followed the road of white stones through a peaceful forest and up the hill. The horse walked forward at a steady pace, easily bearing the weight of 2 riders. Sunshine fell through the canopy of leaves in wide beams, making their surroundings look like a fairy tale. Sunny was enjoying the beauty of the forest and its tranquility. A long time ago, before coming to the Kingdom of Hope, he had known neither. His life had been nothing but bloodshed and pain, battle after battle, war after war. Only after coming to this realm and deciding to remain here did he learn the truth of how joyous life could be, especially when shared with those you love. His son, however, didn't know anything about strife and darkness. This peace was all he had ever known. For that reason, he was extremely bored. The boy fidgeted for a few minutes, then stared at the hilt of Sunny's sword, declaring that one day he was going to have a sword of his own, and that it would be way bigger and sharper than his old man's, and to mark his words. Sunny laughed, asking the boy what he needed a sword for. His son glanced at him with confusion, shooting back and asking what he meant what for, and that it was to become an awakened, a warrior like him. Sunny looked away and didn't respond for a while. His eyes grew distant. His heart ached. Why did it ache so much today? Sunny said quietly that he was a warrior once, true, but he never chose to be a warrior and had just become one to survive, and that in the Kingdom of Hope, the boy didn't need to fight, suffer, and kill others to live a long and happy life, asking why he would still want to be a warrior. The boy fell silent, a comically thoughtful frown appearing on his face. He turned away and didn't say anything else for a while. Sunny doubted that his son really understood what he meant, and he hoped that the boy never would. Closing his eyes, he said a silent prayer, praying Hail to Desire, Demon of Hope, asking that she hear his yearning, protect his son from all the horrors of the world, and save him as she had saved him. Silently, the 3 of them, the man, the boy, and the horse, left the forest and climbed the tall hill. From its top, a breathtaking sight opened before them. In front of them, a vast plain was bathed in sunlight, emerald grass shining with the morning dew. Here and there, farmsteads and fields stood, golden wheat swaying in the wind. Sparkling ribbons of rivers cut the plain, and in the distance, a beautiful city built of white stone rose from the ground with a magnificent pagoda towering above it. Sunny couldn't help but smile. No matter how many times he saw it, he couldn't help but feel a little bit sentimental, and said, asking the boy whether he wanted to wave to his mother, since he was sure she was looking in this direction right now. His son glanced at him with a pitying expression, scoffing and asking whether he was crazy, and that she wouldn't see them since they were too far away. Sunny laughed, asking says who. He turned around and looked back at a similar landscape that lay behind them. Gazing past the forest, he saw the small town and a humble stone manor standing near it. From this distance, the building looked like a toy. He raised his hand and waved, and his son ventured, saying, "Hey, Dad." Sunny scoffed, retorting and asking what, and whether the boy was going to mock him some more. The boy shook his head, saying no, and that it was just what was wrong with the sky since it looked funny. He thought, Sunny raised his head, then frowned in confusion. The sky indeed looked funny. The sun was still climbing up, but there seemed to be a second one right above them, swelling with incandescent light. The sky itself was growing brighter and brighter as though permeated with intense heat. The clouds were all gone. A gust of hot wind suddenly blew past them. His eyes suddenly narrowed and Sunny stammered, telling the boy to wait. In the next second, a colossal pillar of incandescent flame suddenly fell from the sky, piercing the plain and shattering the land like glass. A blinding flash drowned the world in white, and through it, a terrible sound rolled across the forest. Deafened, Sunny felt his son screaming but could not hear his voice. At the point where the pillar of flame fell, the ground itself was split open and thrown into the air, colossal pieces of melted earth raining down fire, ash, and death. The hill on which they stood shook, and then shifted, throwing Sunny off the horse, and Sunny gasped, saying no, no, no. Still dazed, he tried to find his son but failed. Instead, his gaze fell on the small town and the stone manor that stood in the distance. As Sunny watched in horror, the ground opened up with fountains of fire shooting into the sky. The houses were instantly devoured by the flames and incinerated, turning into clouds of ash, and Sunny screamed, no, no, no. In the next moment, the whole hill crumbled. The last thing Sunny saw before being smothered by the avalanche of scorching earth was the fragile figure of his son being swallowed by flames, and Sunny howled, no, and then he died. Pain, pain, pain. Why did his heart hurt so much? Sunny opened his eyes in the darkness and sat down, throwing the furs aside. He stared at his feeble chest, then touched it with a shaking hand, surprised. Since when did his chest start to ache during the night? Sunny sighed, remarking that being old was not fun. Chasing the remnants of a terrible nightmare away, he struggled to sit up and massaged his joints for a while, waiting until some flexibility returned to them. Then, he slowly stood up and closed his eyes. Listening to the sounds of the sacred grove that enveloped him, well, at least he woke up alive. At his age, that was already an accomplishment. If only his heart didn't ache so much. But that was just what being old meant. Every dawn brought a new ache. Actually, Sunny would have been more scared if he woke up and suddenly felt perfectly fine. In any case, it was time to face a new day. Using a wooden cane, Sunny walked out of his hut and breathed in the clear, sweet air of the sacred grove. The ancient trees rustled gently, as though greeting him. The forest was slowly waking up, emerald leaves longing to be bathed in the warmth of the sun once more. A chilly fog was flowing between the mighty trunks, suffused with the vibrant lilac light of the early dawn. The nightingales sang cheerfully, jumping from branch to branch. The sight of it was familiar, beautiful, and calming. Truly, the Grove of Heart God was the jewel of the Kingdom of Hope. How lucky he was to have been born and spend most of his life here. These trees had stood upon the ancient land before it had been shattered, weathered the terrible cataclysm of Desire's imprisonment, and were going to remain standing here long after he was dead and forgotten his bones buried at their roots. Now that Sunny was old and didn't have a lot of time left to live, that thought was very comforting. A human's life might be fleeting, but the beautiful grove was eternal. He patted one of the ancient oaks as an old friend sighed, and limped toward the water spring to fill his jug. Since Sunny's hut stood at the outskirts of the grove, he could see the edge of the island through the spaces between the tree trunks. As always, it rose and fell slowly, the heavenly chains rattling from time to time. Everything was just as usual, which was the very best thing in the world. Sunny had lived a long life. Some of it was peaceful, and some of it was turbulent. But luckily, the turbulent times had not visited this quiet forest for a long, long time. And that was the only thing that he had always wanted, to live a quiet and tranquil life far away from all the strife and misfortune of the ever-changing world. Change always brought ruin on its wings. Sunny wanted no part of it. However, today, his desires were not meant to come true. Something unexpected did happen, disturbing the familiar routine of his day. At the very edge of the island, a mighty black steed suddenly appeared, as though jumping from below, where a giant chain connected to the soil of the sacred grove. He walked forward at a steady pace, approaching the line of ancient trees. The steed had no saddle, but there was a rider on his back. A pretty young woman in a simple red tunic sat there, her ivory legs svelte and bare. She had a graceful figure, a face so lovely that it simply demanded to be gazed upon, and chestnut hair that fell down like a silken waterfall. Sunny stared at the young woman, mesmerized by her beauty. Then he scoffed and shook his head, grumbling at himself, asking what he was even doing, calling himself an old fool, and that his days of ogling pretty girls were long over, and that this beauty was young enough to be his granddaughter, telling himself to have some shame, you vile lecher. He chuckled wryly, and then changed his course to greet the unexpected guest. A dozen meters or so away from the line of trees, the young beauty stopped her horse, jumped down with breathtaking grace, and knelt in the soft grass, looking down as other pilgrims would usually do. Sonny made his way toward the girl, panting a little from the strain, and tried to put on a smile worthy of an enlightened elder. For some reason, the closer he got to the beauty, the worse his heart ached, and Sonny muttered. Asking what was wrong with this frail body of his today, Sonny called out, greeting the young lady and welcoming her, asking what brought her to the Heart Grove and telling her to tell this old man her worries, since maybe he would be able to help. The beauty did not raise her head, still looking down as if to show her respect and reverence. Her voice, when she spoke, was melodious and calm. However, Sonny had been meeting pilgrims like her for many decades. All of them came here overwhelmed by sorrows and regret. That was why they sought out a passage to the sacred grove. This was a place of solace. He could sense a deep ocean of darkness hiding behind the facade of calmness the young woman had put on too, she said.
And I seek audience with the Lady of the Grove.
Sonny lingered for a bit, then sighed. He thought so young and yet so troubled, how sad. Then he leaned on his cane and smiled, offering that the lady ought to be up and about by now, and that he would wait with her until the lady arrived. The young beauty didn't answer and simply continued to stare down, still like a statue. Her breathing was deep and steady. Even her scary black horse seemed patient and indifferent. Suddenly, Sonny felt a strange unease. He took a closer look at the girl and frowned, muttering and asking whether he had dementia now, and what in the name of hope that was. His eyes seemed to be playing tricks on him. Sonny could swear that he saw a radiant sphere of light burning inside the young beauty's chest. Not that he was looking in that direction. Without any reason, his hand suddenly stretched sideways, his palm opening as if waiting to grasp something out of the air. Sonny stared at it in confusion. Weird. What are you doing, stupid hand? He awkwardly hid the willful hand behind his back and cleared his throat. Maybe he didn't quite recover from that terrible nightmare yet. As he did so, the young woman suddenly spoke, her head still bowed.
Have you ever seen the ivory tower?
He thought it was an unexpected question. Sonny grinned, replying, oh, sure, and that when he was a senseless youth not much older than her. It might not look like it, but this elder was quite a wastrel once, and that he ran away from home and went on an adventure, and that was when he saw the Ivory City and many other things. But eventually he came back to this grove since there was nowhere better than home, he believed. He thought for a few moments, and then asked her why she asked. The young woman remained silent for a while.
That there's an evil demon locked inside the tower, that the gods put her there as a punishment for her malevolence, corruption, and pride. Do you think it's true?
Sonny chuckled, saying that, and that sometimes he forgot how much knowledge had been lost by them, the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Hope, and that yes, young lady, there was indeed a demon imprisoned within the ivory tower. However, she was never evil, malevolent, or corrupt, and that in fact, Hope was very kind and generous to them humans. The beauty shifted slightly.
Why did the gods punish her then?
Sonny sighed dejectedly, musing that that was the question, wasn't it, and asking why destroy this land and put its kind lady in shackles, and who knows, and that if mortals like them could know the will of gods, then maybe they would be gods instead. There it was again, the radiant flame in the young woman's chest. He wasn't imagining things, it was really there. Sonny was about to try and get a better look, uncaring of how improper such an attempt would seem, but at that moment, a dearly familiar voice came from behind him. However, he had never heard that voice sound so somber and grave. The Lady of the Grove said,
And why are you here solving? Why have you come here solving?
Sonny turned around, looking at the delicate woman who stood behind him, her dress woven out of simple green fabric, a girdle of tree bark wrapped around her thin waist. Despite looking only slightly older than their guest, with soft skin and sparkling hazel eyes, she had a calm and confident presence about her that brought peace and a feeling of safety to all who surrounded her. The woman looked beautiful, wise, and young. So young. She also resembled Sonny very much, as always. Seeing her brought both warm joy and deep sadness to his heart. Sonny smiled, hiding his sorrow, then said in a tone most gentle and loving, greeting his mom and telling her they had a guest. The lady of the grove, his mother, looked at him for a short moment, and then answered in a voice that rang with tension and urgency, commanding him to get away from her child now. Sonny frowned, confused, then did as he was told, arduously pushing his old body forward with the help of the cane. His heart was sending pulses of pain radiating through his chest. Even walking was hard today. Behind him, a dark smile appeared on the face of the young beauty whom his mother called Solvin. She slowly rose from the grass and faced the lady of the grove, her radiant eyes burning with grim light.
Know why I came here. There is no need to pretend, Aider.
Sonny finally reached his mother and stood beside her, turning around to look at the strange pilgrim. Something isn't right. How does she know my mother's name? Was she perhaps a powerful awakened? Well, whoever she was, the eternal guardian of the sacred grove was not going to let things get too out of hand. She was not only his mother, but also transcendent Aider, the blessed of heart god, after all. So there was no reason to worry. Nothing terrible ever happened in the sacred grove. His thoughts were interrupted by the fact that, suddenly, another brilliant sphere of light appeared in view, this one inside the body of his own mother. Sonny stared at her back for a few moments, then glanced at Solvin. He even looked at the horse. Meanwhile, the smile disappeared from Solvin's beautiful face. Her voice turned cold and sharp as she said,
Rumors that across all of the Kingdom of Hope, a cult of her followers was slowly spreading like a virulent plague. Imagine my surprise, my indignation, my rage, when I discovered that you were the source of this disease. You.
Sonny's face darkened. He thought, so that's what this was all about. He had warned his mother that this might happen. Saying anything good about a demon was tantamount to offending the gods these days. Maybe he should have followed his own advice and kept his mouth shut earlier. Sonny cursed under his breath, saying damnation. Solvin, meanwhile, clenched her fists.
You're wishing to be proven wrong, but instead saw that the accusations were true. Your own son is infected by this heresy. How could you betray us so? You have created a cult of demon worshippers. You have nurtured the very thing that we were created to prevent.
The lady of the grove scowled.
So what if I did? Do you think, perhaps, that I have forgotten the solemn oath we had given? No, you are the ones who are blind to the will of the Lord of Light. You are the ones who have failed in your duty.
Solvin stared at the delicate woman in the green dress for a while, her expression grim. Then, she slowly shook her head.
You are so broken. How did you allow your soul to get so twisted? You, out of all of us, should have been the last to become lost. Your God should have protected you. He is the God of souls, is he not?
Sonny heard his mother chuckle, her voice devoid of amusement.
Be done with it, Solvin. Did you not say that there was no need for us to pretend? Just say what you have come to say and leave this place. War isn't welcomed here.
The young beauty in a red tunic remained silent for a long time, then slowly raised her hand. Sonny frowned, noticing that there was now a strange knife forged out of a single strip of dull metal in it. Where did it come from? His mother suddenly trembled. He had never seen her afraid before. Sonny breathed, telling Solvin that she wouldn't dare. Solvin gritted her teeth.
My hand, Aider. None of us wanted this. But in the end, they all agreed.
The lady of the grove fell silent, then shook her head, and his mother whispered that Solvin lied, and that Noctis would never abandon her. She took a step forward and smiled, and his mother retorted that no one agreed, and that Solving was there of her own will with none of the other chain lords giving their permission, asking whether she really thought they would allow something like that to happen, and that no matter which one of them fell, the one who remained would no longer be fateless, and that the balance of power between them seven would be irrevocably broken, obliterated, asking whether she was mad, and whether she could even imagine what kind of disaster would follow. But then her voice trailed off and she stumbled. Her beautiful hazel eyes widened. Sunny shivered, feeling that just then something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. His mother stared at Solving, her face growing deathly pale. And then she whispered, realizing that unless Solving did better than any of them. And breathing, oh Solving, how ruthless she was. Sunny felt his heartache growing stronger. There was a cold sensation grasping his chest, making him clutch at it with a pained grimace, and Sunny groaned, asking what they were even talking about, and that he didn't understand and what was going on. Ader of the sacred grove looked down for a long time, then spoke. Her voice was quiet and full of sorrow, and his mother said softly that she saw now, she understood. And that she should have known that out of all of them, Solving was the bravest, and that this sacrifice, Solving, even in the realm of shadows, she wouldn't forget it. With that, she turned to Sunny, who was really confused by what was happening, and smiled sadly, and his mother whispered, telling him she was sorry and asking him to forgive her if he could. With that, his mother faced the beauty in the red tunic and raised her delicate hand, a knife carved out of a single piece of wood suddenly appearing in it. As though out of nowhere, her voice grew firm and determined, and his mother declared that, however, Solving should not have challenged her on this hallowed ground, and that she wouldn't give up without a fight, and neither would her grove. The young woman facing her smiled, her radiant eyes shining with a furious light.
I'll prove it.
Sunny crawled through the ash, suffocating on bitter smoke, calling for his mom. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks, evaporating because of the terrible heat. His heart ached. Oh, it ached so horribly. All of him was in pain, and all around him, the sacred grove burned, enveloped by incinerating, raging fire. He could hear the screams of its inhabitants echoing in the dim darkness, humans and beasts alike, burning alive as their whole world was being slowly turned into ash, and Sunny sobbed, asking how this could be. Pushing himself forward with the weak hands of a useless old man, he crawled toward the delicate figure lying on the ground a few meters, so far away. He refused to die before he reached it, whimpering for his mom. And then, finally, he reached her. The lady of the grove lay dead amidst the fire shards of a strange iron dagger sizzling in the blood-soaked mud around her. Swallowing tears, Sunny awkwardly hugged her body and let out a stifled howl. Why did it feel so familiar? As though he had felt this pain once, a long time ago, already in another world. Sunny wailed, asking why she was dead and whether she wasn't supposed to be immortal. And how this could be, and that no, this was just a bad dream, a nightmare, and that he needed to wake up, telling himself to wake up. But no matter what he did, he couldn't. Even if it was just a nightmare, he was trapped in it, unable to escape, and Sunny whispered, realizing he was trapped in a nightmare. As this strange thought rang in his mind, a trunk of an ancient tree suddenly fell nearby, a whirlwind of fiery sparks and burning debris raising into the air. Sunny stared at it, feeling his vision darken and his thoughts disappear one after another. He was coughing, unable to stop. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocating, and Sunny gasped, asking how this happened. The old man stared at the burning forest, his eyes aflame with grief and mad disbelief. How could the sacred grove be destroyed? Wasn't it supposed to stand tall, beautiful and tranquil, long after he was dead? Wasn't it supposed to outlive him? A sense of utter, lightless sorrow and despair drowned his mind, just like smoke was drowning his lungs and pain was drowning his body, and Sunny moaned, telling himself this was a nightmare, just a nightmare, that it couldn't be real, no. That bitter thought was the last one that appeared in Sunny's mind before he fell into the searing darkness. And in that darkness, alone and hurting, he died. Pain. Terrible, torturous pain. His heart was in pain, but so was the rest of him. Sonny couldn't open his eyes because they were glued together with dried blood. But if he did, all he would see would be the dark walls of a dungeon cell where he was strapped to a rusty torture device, red-hot metal spikes thrust into his body, lost and forgotten, far away from the light of the blessed sun. A familiar voice invaded his ears, making him shudder.
Ah, you're awake. Good. You've been out of it for so long this time, my friend. Shall we continue?
More torture. Sonny sighed, knowing what awaited him all too well. He could barely remember who he was before ending up in this cold dungeon, or why he was being tormented by the owner of the cursed voice. All he knew was pain, darkness, and despair. However, this time, all of it didn't seem so terrible. What could have been worse than the harrowing nightmare he had just seen? Solvin Ader Noctis. The name sounded familiar. Had he known these people once, perhaps, before this hell, if anything even existed outside of it, of course? In any case, that didn't matter. All that mattered was pain, torment, and hopelessness. He gritted his teeth. It was time to face a new day. The torture continued without end. Day after day, night after night. Sonny screamed when he had the voice and remained silent when he lost it. A long time ago, decades ago, he still had pride and endured the torment without giving the torturer the satisfaction of hearing him howl, cry, and beg. But there was no point. Pride had no place here. Only pain. Anyone should have died from the inhuman agony he was subjected to and the terrible wounds dealt to his body. But Sonny didn't die, was unable to die, and so there was no end to his anguish. Every morning his wounds were gone as though he was born anew. Every morning the torturer returned and the cycle continued. The torturer himself never asked Sonny any questions. It was as though he was tormenting his prisoner just for the sake of torment. However, the master of the dungeon never seemed to enjoy his cruelty. He never reveled in the agony of his victim, and instead seemed almost sad while performing his duties. Why was this happening? How long had it been happening? When would this never-ending nightmare end? Sonny whispered the words like a broken prayer. Never-ending nightmare. Sonny didn't know. He barely knew himself anymore. All he knew was fear, darkness, and pain. He breathed the words, "Lord, save me." On one of these days, he opened his eyes to see the torturer entering the cell. His personal executioner was tall and noble in bearing, with skin as white as ivory, lustrous golden hair, and amber eyes that were full of calmness, conviction, and melancholy. Just like always, the torturer started preparing his tools, and just like always, Sonny strained his mangled body, pointlessly trying to break free of his shackles. But this time, something unexpected happened. Sonny froze and stared at the radiant man in front of him, his eyes widening. Sonny breathed, "Can this be?" Just like in the harrowing nightmare he had seen a few days ago, there was a beautiful sphere of light burning within the torturer's chest. Its splendor washed over Sonny, making the terrible pain recede for a moment. A weak, pale smile found its way onto his face. Sonny bathed in the light and whispered, "Sun." Oh, how he had longed to see the sun again. The torturer froze, then slowly turned to him. His amber eyes shone with sudden emotion. Sevres asked, "You are speaking again." He took a tentative step forward and studied Sonny's face, then gently caressed it. Sevres murmured, "Brother, my brother, how good it is to hear your voice once more." Sonny shivered. Sonny asked, "Brother, are we brothers?" He was weak and confused. Thoughts danced chaotically in his broken mind, fragile like snowflakes in the summer's heat. He found it hard to concentrate on anything, even if he wanted to. But he didn't want to, not for a long time. The torturer smiled sadly. Sevres asked, "Have you forgotten even me?" Sonny frowned, trying to remember. Brother. Did he have a brother? Yes, he used to once. His brother was noble, valiant, and wise. His brother was blessed by the Lord of Light. He was entrusted with a sacred duty. And so was Sonny himself. Or maybe he was just remembering shattered fragments of old nightmares. Who could tell? He weakly shook his head. Sonny asked, "If we are brothers, then why are you torturing me?" The torturer remained silent for a while, then laughed sadly. Severus said, "Ah, that old question. You haven't asked it in decades." He leaned forward and looked at Sunny with sorrow. Severus said, "Don't you remember? You were the one who asked me to do this after all." Sunny's pupils widened. Sunny whispered, "No, no." Sunny breathed, "I asked you." The torturer nodded. Severus said, "As penitence for the terrible sin you committed, for betraying the trust of the Lord of Light. Was it a century ago?" "Yes, almost." He turned away and picked up a long blade, thrusting it into the flames that burned furiously in a golden brazier. Severus said, "It has been almost a century since you abandoned me. Ah, enduring our duty alone was not easy, my brother. It wasn't easy at all, but I never broke my word to you." Sunny stared as the blade was slowly starting to glow inside the flames. Knowing that it would be soon thrust into his flesh instead, he shuddered. Sunny whispered, "If I asked you, then stop. I don't want it anymore." The torturer looked down, then smiled darkly. Severus said, "Stop, but we can't stop, not until you answered the question." Sunny's eyes were glued to the blade. He whispered, "Question, what question?" His brother was silent for a bit, and then asked, "Where is that which was entrusted to us by the Lord? What have you done with the knives?"
Knives? What knives?
Sunny couldn't recall any knife, and could only think about the one that was already glowing red in the golden brazier. Sunny whispered, "I don't know." His torturer sighed. Severus said, "Then your penitence can't stop." With that, he took the blade out of the fire and brought it to Sunny's chest, where an aching heart was beating wildly like a caged beast. Sunny searched his memory, desperate for the torture to end. No, he couldn't remember. A split second before the tip of the blade cut his skin, he suddenly shouted, "Shadow! Shadow stole it. The ember knife. Shadow took it from me. It was his fault. His." The blade froze without reaching Sunny's flesh. The torturer looked away, a somber expression on his face. Severus said, "It is good that you finally spoke. However, that mystery had been revealed some time ago. After all, Shadow is long dead." He glanced at Sunny, then asked coldly, "But what of the other? Where is the ivory knife that I have given you? Did Shadow steal it as well?" Sunny shivered, then slowly shook his head. Sunny whispered, "No, I hid it. I hid it far away." His brother closed his eyes. Severus asked, "Where did you hide it?" Tears streamed down Sunny's face. He strained in his bindings, desperately trying to free himself. Sunny cried out, I don't remember. I don't know." The torturer signed, then dropped the searing blade to the ground. Severus said, "Useless. This is all useless. A century of this, and you are still resisting." He grabbed his head and groaned, then suddenly laughed, his voice echoing from the stone walls of the dungeon. Severus cried out, "I'm tired. I'm more tired of this than you are, brother. Why have you deserted me? I can't save you, no matter what I do. I can't clear away your guilt. I can't redeem you in the eyes of the Lord." He fell silent, and slowly his face turned calm and solemn. Then he glanced at Sunny and said, mad resolve shining in his eyes, "A century is enough. Going further will only break what is left of you, my dear brother. If we can't redeem your sin, then we must burn it away. The blessing of the fire. We will invent our own instead of the one you lost." A day finally came when Sunny was freed from his bindings and dragged away from the dungeon cell. He was too weak to fight his jailers and saw no point in it. He didn't really understand what was happening and was just glad to finally leave the darkness of the torture chamber. He was so happy that tears fell from his amber eyes. Sunny was brought to a vast chamber that was full of terrible heat and drowned by an angry orange glow. Sunny murmured, "Strange, what a strange place." In front of him was a giant pit filled with molten steel. There were giant firs blowing a constant stream of wind into the fire below. He heard the sound of hooves ringing on the stones and saw a mighty horse with blinders on his eyes walk constantly in circles, spinning the wooden wheel it was attached to, which in turn worked the firs. In front of the pit, A strange iron cage lay on the floor. It was made in the shape of a man's body and opened, revealing the human-shaped emptiness within. Sunny whispered, "What is this?"
Be brave, my brother.
Sunny flinched, hearing the familiar voice. He turned his head and saw the torturer standing beside him with a dark and determined expression on his face. Severus said, "Today we will burn away your sin. We will make you into the tool of the gods once more." Before Sunny could realize what was happening, he was placed into the strange cage, which was then closed shut, leaving him in utter darkness. His new prison hugged his body like a metal carapace. He couldn't move or see anything. He was like a soul encased inside the body of an iron man. Panicking, Sunny tried to struggle against his metal prison, but it was of no use. He heard the sound of chains and felt himself being raised into the air. Sunny stammered, "W what?" And then he was lowered down into the giant pit of molten metal. The outsides of his cage grew hot and then searing, and then scorching, incinerating, immolating. Locked within the incandescent iron cage, Sunny screamed and screamed, his flesh constantly burning and restoring itself, his broken mind drowning in agony and heat, in the fire. But no matter how much he screamed, the burning was eternal, just like he himself was. Burning, he was burning. Sunny woke up with a scream, still enveloped in the horror of the nightmare. He shuddered, then clutched at his chest, which was full of sharp tear pain. Sunny let out a ragged cry of pain. The shadows rustled around him, distressed by the sudden scream of their master. Sunny muttered, "A nightmare! I haven't had one in centuries." He grimaced and then stood up, listening to the rattling of the heavenly chains in the distance. It was time to face a new day. Hopefully his last. Sunny walked through the empty halls of his castle, shrouded in shadows. Wherever he passed, the pale radiance of moonlight disappeared, devoured by the tide of flowing darkness. His steps were silent, and so were his thoughts. Raising a hand clad in a glove of black silk, he traces his fingers across the intricate engravings, uncaring to remember the events depicted on the ancient stone walls. They were his triumphs and his victories, etched into the annals of history. But all of it was so distant and had happened so long ago at the dawn of the Age of Heroes. He had been a hero once, too, battling the remnants of the corruption across the mortal realms. He had been cunning and fearless, valiant and unrelenting, full of faith and hope. The Age of Heroes was over, but Sunny still remained. By now, all of his servants and warriors had long left, taking the treasures he did not care about anymore with them. The halls of the castle were populated by shadows. And nothing else, well, except for one loyal fool who was too stubborn to get the hint. Sunny murmured, "Sorry, kid, you should have found a better master." Damnation, why did his heart suddenly hurt so much? Sunny opened the gates to the courtyard, not bothering to close them as he left. This castle of his would be, without a doubt, overtaken by one of the other chain lords soon enough, or maybe even a ragtag gang of random bandits. He did not care too much about it, either. Standing in the darkness, Sunny hesitated and then took out 2 knives from the hidden sheaths on his forearms. One seemed to be cut from a single piece of ghostly glass, the other from beautiful ember. One was the knife entrusted to him by the Lord of Light, and the other was the one he had stolen. The nightmare he had seen must have been because of a sense of guilt he had not known he felt. But why would he? The fool only had himself to blame for losing the knife to Sunny. And surely, the 2 brothers were not demented enough to come up with something that distasteful, at least not yet. Sunny sighed and shook his head, indifferent to the fate of the other immortals. Then, he turned slightly and watched as a tall figure appeared from the darkness. A towering demon with pale gray skin, 4 arms and twisting horns approached him and bowed his head, a sorrowful expression contorting the bestial lines of his face. Sunny smiled. Sunny said, "Don't look so gloom, kid. You knew that this would happen eventually." The demon didn't answer. Not that he was able to. With another sigh, Sunny hid the ember knife in its sheath and handed the glass one to the tall creature, who hesitated for a few moments and took it with fear and reverence. Sunny said, "Be careful not to drop it. A god made that knife, you know. It is a very precious thing. precious enough that even you aren't suited to wield it. The others will eat you alive if they ever find out." He looked northeast, considering something, and then added, "Take it to the temple of the chalice and give it to the war maiden. Tell her that we'll meet again in the realm of shadows. That is my last order to you, kid. After that, you will be free." The demon clenched his fists, then slowly shook his head. Sunny chuckled. Sunny commanded, "And yet this is how it has to be. Now go, your master commands you." The creature looked down, then growled sorrowfully and disappeared into the darkness. Sunny watched him go. Soon the towering demon left the castle, crossed the hills of emerald grass, and climbed down to one of the chains leading away from the island. Making sure that the creature was gone, Sunny recalled his shadow scouts and then clicked his tongue. Sunny muttered. He didn't even look back once. What a heartless little imp. With that, he walked toward the gates of the castle, followed by a sea of shadows. As he walked, a beautiful black stallion rose from them, his mane as dark as night, with long horns protruding from his head and his teeth resembling that of a wolf more than that of a normal horse. The stallion's eyes burned with menacing crimson flames. Sunny smiled. Sunny said, "Greetings, old friend. Will you let me ride on your back one last time?" He jumped into the saddle and sent his terrifying steed galloping across the land. They flew through shadows and raced across the chains that swayed between two lightless skies, jumping from one island to another, full of bliss and exhilaration of speed. Sunny breathed, "Ah, this is the one thing I will miss." After centuries of being burdened by the crushing weight of knowledge and duty, Sunny was finally free and at peace. The night sky above him was vast and beautiful, and so was the one below. Everything was perfect, except for one thing. Why did his heart have to hurt so much? Surely, he didn't have any regrets left. Just before dawn approached, they reached a secluded and lonesome island. Sunny jumped off the horse, patted him on the back, and said his farewells. The steed then turned into a vast, sprawling shadow and disappeared as though he had never existed at all. The black stallion even made an attempt to hide his heartbreaking grief, to not burden his creator with it, and not turn their final farewell bitter. Sunny remained still for a few moments, and then made his way to the edge of the island. There, he undid the strings of his tunic and bared his chest, then knelt, looking down into the endless darkness of the sky below, the divine flames burning in its depths. The other didn't know yet what awaited them all. None except for maybe Solving, who had sealed their fates with her merciless hand. Had she known the consequences of her cruel choice, or had she been simply too blind to see? In any case, Sunny wanted no part of what was to come. He had always prided himself on being a cheat and a coward, and so he chose an easy way out. The moon was already gone and the sun had not yet risen. In this darkest of hours, he was surrounded by nothing except shadows and the singing of the wind. A deep sigh escaped from his lips. Sunny whispered, "Came like dew, disappears like dew." With that, Sunny raised his hand and, without even flinching, thrust the beautiful ember knife through the intricate scales of the serpent that coiled around his chest. As terrible pain drowned his mind with agony, a pale smile appeared on his face. Sunny breathed, "Free. I am, finally, free." His body swayed, and then fell down into the endless abyss of the sky below, disappearing from the edge of the island just as the first ray of sunlight appeared over the horizon. Sunny fell into absolute darkness. Wrapped in its soothing embrace, finally he died. Sunny woke up. His chest hurt for some reason, but he couldn't allow himself to sleep any longer. It was time to face anew. Sunny muttered, "What the hell? Doesn't this seem awfully familiar?" Sunny woke up from a nightmare where he was a shadow that had lost the will to live, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a prince being drowned in a fiery tomb of molten steel, who woke up from a nightmare where he was an old man dying as he held the body of his murdered mother, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a mortal watching his world being destroyed by a god. Soon enough, Sunny found himself tied to a stake, with fire spreading through the pile of tinder beneath his bare feet, as a crowd of people whom he had considered friends and neighbors watched with demented glee. All he could do was struggle desperately against his bonds and pray that the smoke would smother him before the flames reached his flesh. But his prayers were not answered. Screaming from inside the fire, he died. It was time to face a new day. Sunny fought desperately as sharp fangs tore his flesh apart as he was being eaten alive. But no matter how much he struggled, it was of no use. The monster was just too strong and mad and cruel. And then he died. It was time to face a new day again. Sunny drowned, a heavy chain tied around his legs. Sunny bled to death on a battlefield. Suffering from terrible thirst and too weak to move, hungry crows tearing at his face with sharp beaks, Sunny watched his entire family be executed before being hanged from the walls of a somber fortress. Thrown into the boundless darkness of the sky below by his heartless mother, Sunny died of hunger, thirst, and feared too tired to scream or cry. Sunny was killed and turned into a wooden doll by a vengeful sorcerer, and then killed again after an eternity of silent servitude. The doll burning to ashes as it fell into an ocean of white flames. His heart was pierced with an obsidian knife on an altar made of pure darkness. His body was cleaved apart by the blade of a giant warrior in a red tattered robe, while the jubilant crowd cheered from the stone seats of an ancient theater. It was time to face a new day again. The nightmares never ended, bleeding into one another. Each time, Sunny woke up sure that the agony he had experienced was just a harrowing dream. But very soon, his waking life would turn into pure horror itself. And then he would die. And then it would be time to face a new day again. Sunny dreamt of being mighty and weak, young and old, men and women, humans and beasts. Their end was always the same. Everywhere he went, everywhere he fled, no matter who he was, there was only pain and death and madness. It was as though everyone he met was infected by a terrible, unexplainable madness. The whole world was mad. And he was slowly going mad, too. After a while, he found that waking up was getting harder and harder. Sometimes he failed to differentiate which of his lives was real and which ones he had just dreamt of. Even though the horrors he had experienced seemed like a nightmare, their weight accumulated, slowly breaking his spirit apart. His faces changed, his memories changed, but one thing always remained the same: the terror, the ever-present. Chilling terror of waking up from a nightmare only to be thrust into a worse one instead. And two other things remained the same as well: the pain in his chest, and the spheres of light that he saw from time to time burning inside someone's soul. Sunny was a soldier in a war between the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum. Consumed by terror, he watched as a brilliant colossus made of lustrous steel stepped forward, making the whole island shake. A giant metal hand slowly moved forward, catching a swift flying ship and crushing the vessel in its enormous fist. And then, the iron giant took another step. Suddenly, the sky disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of polished metal. The colossus brought his foot down, crushing Sunny and all of his comrades into a bloody paste. Sunny died. And then he woke up with a scream. It was time to face a new day again. Sunny gasped. That was too much. He shivered, remembering the terrifying sight of the steel giant advancing toward the trembling row of soldiers. Who would be mad enough to challenge the indestructible Sun Prince? Well, he knew who. The warmongers were all insane, each and every one of them. Some said that they had been different and called by another name once, that they had been valiant and brave, champions who protected the kingdom of hope from the beasts of corruption. But he didn't really believe it. As long as Sunny was alive, and as long as his father was alive, and his grandfather as well, the warmongers had been the same. Bloodthirsty monsters wearing human skins. Luckily, the war was raging far away from here. In the northern reaches of the Kingdom of Hope, people didn't have to worry about the madness of the followers of war and the misguided righteousness of the followers of Sun. Granted, they had their own worries. Shuddering and still in the grasp of the nightmare, Sunny massaged his aching chest and rose. Today, his lady was going to meet with the emissaries of the Night Temple. It was a high honor, but also not without risk. As a knight tasked with protecting her, Sunny had to be ready for anything. Sunny muttered, "Why? Why does my heart hurt so much today?" Shivering, he reached for his clothes.
I know.
Sunny and a young girl in a beautiful silk dress that was passed down to her from her mother, and for that reason, a little bit too long for the girl's awkward figure, had nowhere else to run. The pursuers, who had already slaughtered the rest of their party, chased them to the very edge of the island. Now, there was nothing but the darkness of the sky below in front of them. And behind them, steel hooves were already ringing on the stones, growing closer and closer. The teenage girl stared into the bottomless abyss, then turned to him. Her lips trembled. Rain asked, "Sir, what should we do?" Her face was soft and pale, not yet touched by the sharpness of maturity. Her eyes, usually so gentle and bright, were now dull and full of fear. Sunny hesitated, then drew his sword and turned his back to the abyss. Sunny said, "Don't be afraid, my lady. I'm with you." He said those empty words, knowing full well that it was a lie. He was just one man. He was not even an awakened. What could a mundane swordsman like him do against this foe? The girl, young as she was, knew that he was lying too. A few moments before the first of the pursuer appeared from the darkness, she grabbed his forearm and looked at him with desperate resolve. Rain pleaded, "You, don't let them. Don't let them take me alive, sir. Please." Sunny gritted his teeth, remained silent for a second, and then slowly nodded. His heart hurt. It hurt so much. The pain was almost blinding. A second later, a mighty black stallion appeared in front of them, bearing an armored rider on his back. The rider jumped down, moving with a speed that no mundane human could ever hope to match. He unsheathed his own sword and glanced at Sunny, his eyes hidden behind a visor of a menacing black helmet. His voice sounded like a voice of an ancient monster. Sunny said, "Step aside, warrior. We only need the maiden. You can still walk away alive." Sunny laughed. Why did his heart hurt so much? Dying was already painful enough. He looked at the awakened hunter in front of him, then at the young girl he had sworn to protect. Sunny whispered, "Why does this nightmare never stop?" And then he lowered his sword and stepped aside. Both of them looked at him, the pursuer with dark amusement, his lady with shock and disbelief. Her voice trembled. Rain asked, "Sir, what? What are you doing?" Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. Sunny said, "Why is this world so insane?" Sunny continued, "I am very sorry, my lady. Please don't hold a grudge against me. But you see, how do I say this?" He looked at her, then in the direction of the awakened hunter. Then he shook his head and said, "I am pretty sure that you are not real."